Chapter 1001, A Gift Like No Other, Part 1. Reserving a suite isn't just a good idea, it's great. I'd like to live the next few days as if we are the last humans on Mogar, with magical domestic staff that conveniently appears only to do the chores for us. Camilla gave Lith one of her radiant smiles that always made him feel like the luckiest man alive. She had applied months in advance for a few days' leave on her birthday to be sure that nothing would mess with their plans. Even though she had finished working just for a few hours and was dead tired from the long day, she had dressed up for him. Moreover, Lith still found it hard to believe Camilla could smile like that despite knowing most of his secrets. She treated him as if Lith was just a regular guy rather than a mysterious hybrid implicated in power games that involved beings older than the kingdom itself. Having someone like Camilla by his side, who wasn't bound to him by blood ties or common interests, but simply by sincere affection, was the greatest gift he could ask for. Just like home, then. After all, during your days off you sleep all day and leave buying the groceries, doing the chores, and the cooking to me. Lith teased her. That's not true. I don't sleep all day, only when you let me. The fact that was the only part she could refute made her blush in embarrassment. Jokes aside, this place is fairy-like. I can't believe they soundproofed the entire building to not disturb the animals. Even though the Flying Griffin was fully booked, the guests wouldn't hear anything but their own voices and the sounds of nature. Many small animals felt so confident that they would come close to the terraces and accept the snacks the resort provided to each room. Lith was dolled up as well, wearing a black suit rather than his usual archmage robe. The first course of their meal was venison stew, a local delicacy, accompanied by red house wine. Unlike normal hotels, Lith's suite was located on the ground floor. It allowed the guests to watch the local fauna through the reinforced magical glass of the terrace and to take a stroll along the lake simply by walking through a door. The apartment was made of redwood and was comprised of several rooms. It had a living room furnished with a tea table and sofas to spend some time with friends, a terrace where to dine while enjoying the scenery, a huge bathroom, and an even bigger bedroom. Even though all rooms were magically heated, most of them had their own fireplace for ambience, and the resort was so quiet that, unless the guests called the room service, they had the impression of living in a mountain cottage in the middle of nowhere. What did you want to talk about? Camilla asked. Can it wait until after dinner? Or at least after I give you your birthday gift? Lith said, visibly embarrassed. Not a chance. Once you say those accursed words, I can't relax until I hear the big secret you decided to share with me and mark it as irrelevant. She replied, Am I really so obvious? If after living together for so long I couldn't read you, it would mean that either I don't care about you enough to notice or that you never allowed me to know the real you. Camilla said, I get that you're full of secrets and I'm willing to wait until you are ready to share them with me. But please, don't treat me like an idiot. That's something that I couldn't bear. Lith nodded and then told Camilla about death vision in the details, explaining its quirks to her. Let me get this straight. So, unless you focus, everyone around you dies, or at least that's what it looks like to you. Camilla said, and Lith nodded for her to continue. However, if someone is your friend, then they are safe, within a few meters, while the members of your family are unaffected by death vision as long as they are in your same room, and you X even from over 10 meters, 33 feet, distance? Yes. I never mentioned it to you before, nor did I have the courage to stop holding death vision back in your presence, because I didn't want to make you feel like you had to compete with Floria. Lith said, and because you were afraid death vision measures not only a person's lifespan, but also the depth of your feelings for them. Camilla completed the phrase for him. Yes. Don't worry about hurting my feelings. I would have done the same in your shoes. A mystical power that tells you who you can or cannot love would be a curse even worse than death vision already is. Camilla held his hand, forcing him to look her in the eyes. What's the verdict? Lith took a deep breath to calm down and let go of death vision. You look gorgeous, like always. He said. Great, at least I'm a friend. Now walk to the other side of the suite. Camilla pointed him to the farthest place from their table. Wait, you told me not to worry, that you would do the same. The sudden edge in her voice surprised Lith. I did, but you were also right. Maybe it's not, but death vision sure feels like a damn competition. What about now? Camilla hated to feel so insecure, but she needed to know at all costs. For all I know, death vision might not measure Litha's feelings towards others, but the strength of their bond. It would explain why Floria was immune from the start, whereas even his parents needed time. Not only did he open with her before anyone else, but also Lith relied on Floria, whereas he considered his family as something to protect. He always kept them in the dark, deeming them unable to cope with the truth. She thought, "You're still fine, but I must say you're taking this too seriously." Lith said, "So says the man who waited 2 years before mentioning any of this to me." She sneered while walking through the terrace's door. "Wait, you're still barefoot. I don't give a damn about some dirt. What about now?" She stood in front of the glass door, about 15 meters, 49 feet, away from him, just to be safe. "You've just terrified several ugly carcasses that I can only guess are actually birds and squirrels. You've also ruined my appetite, but you still look as beautiful as a god's dream." He said, "I win, I win, I win." Camilla sprinted back inside the suite, jumping at Litha's neck and forcing him to princess carry her before giving him a kiss. So much for winning with grace. He chuckled at her enthusiasm. "Sorry, I got carried away." Her radiant smile and excited voice were in stark contrast with her words. After Lith carried Camilla back to her seat and cleaned the floor with first magic, her inquisitive mind that was now free from self-doubt forced her to ask, "Is there a reason why you choose to tell me about this right after settling the matters with the council? You're on fire tonight." "Yes. Now that neither awakened nor humans can mess with my plans, I'm going to awaken Floria. Faluel gave me permission to invite her as my +1 for the apprenticeship." Lith said, Chapter 1002, A Gift Like No Other Part 2. "I'm sorry, but you lost me. Are you asking my permission to bring Floria along, or what?" Camilla's enthusiasm disappeared, and her stomach churned as her insecurities returned. She already didn't like the idea of Lith spending so much time cooped up with a beautiful woman like Faluel, but at least the Hydra was old enough to be his great-great-grandmother, and neither of them seemed interested in the other. Floria, on the other hand, was just slightly older than Lith, was the only person he had opened up to for years, and was soon going to share with him awakening on top of all the magical talents they already had in common. Had Camilla known about Solas's existence, at that point she would have already declared that day her worst birthday ever. Lith first explained to her how his presence and the constant practice of magic had induced awakening in many people close to him. Tista, Uriel, and Floria were the only ones he was aware of, but he kept a close eye on all his family members as well. Only then did he reply to her question. "I'm not asking for your permission. I'm just sharing with you my plans because I don't want any more secrets between us." Lith held her hand, finding it strangely cold. "I feel responsible for Floria because what's happening to her is because of me. I'm not only talking about the awakening, but also about her quitting the army. Without the support of the awakened who wanted to destroy my personal life, Journey would have probably already put an end to that farce of a trial. To make matters worse, I don't have much choice. If I don't help Floria, she'll die. Even though we haven't seen each other much in the past 4 years, she's still one of my dearest friends and a person to whom I owe much. Without her, we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation because I would have broken up with you rather than sharing my secrets. Besides, if after awakening her I don't teach Floria how to use her newfound powers, she'll get both me and Faluel killed." The last part awfully sounded like a lame excuse, mostly because it was. Camilla took a few deep breaths to calm down enough to not say things that she would later regret, like quoting the out of sight, out of mind idiom about the possibility of the apprenticeship rekindling his feelings for Floria at the expense of their relationship. "What about me? Am I going to awaken as well?" Camilla asked. "You have a barely orange core, and I didn't remove many impurities from your body." Lith replied while scanning her with invigoration. "Are you using magic a lot lately?" "Yes. I can still kill people with first magic if they come close enough, and Lady Ernest says that even the simplest trick can save our lives in times of need. She makes me use magic until I almost faint to temper my body and test my limits." Camilla said, "It explains why your impurities have started to shift. The constant exposure to my mana flow combined with invigoration and practice is affecting your system. Do you want to be awakened?" He looked her in the eyes. "To what end? I would see Zinnia and the kids die just to live a long life alone in hiding." Awakening me now would just be a guilt trip on your side, and a dick move on mine to force you to take care of me until death do us part. Camilla's voice and gaze were steady, but her hand trembled. What I want right now is an answer. I realize that you are an all-powerful awakened archmage who is probably going to outlive us all even with your crippled life force. But do you realize it as well? Before Lith could answer, she continued sharing her doubts. I know that this is just your second important relationship, so here's my question. Wouldn't it be better if you dated someone younger, with a less complicated life? Or someone richer and more important, so that no one in the kingdom would dare to bother you? Or someone who's an awakened mage as well? You could share with her all the marvels of magic and take your time deciding whether or not you want to settle down. I'm a 28-years-old woman with more debts than savings, who has no power or influence, and whose career might crumble at any time just like it happened to Floria. Are you sure you don't want to be with someone else? She let go of Litha's hand, both because Camilla wanted him to answer without the physical contact triggering any kind of guilt trip, and because she felt the desperate need to hold on to something to calm her nerves. Lith didn't reply immediately, taking a few seconds to consider her question and not give a hasty emotional answer. I do realize who I am, but even I don't know what I am. My parents are most certainly human, yet I'm anything but. Let's say that we discover that I'm some kind of otherworldly creature, a vengeful spirit similar to an abomination's who is just possessing a human body and slowly turning it into its own. Camilla had shared her insecurities with him, so Lith felt compelled to do the same. There's no telling when my two life forces will merge, nor how much will I change when it happens. If I turn out to be some kind of demon dragon with no place to live either among humans or beasts, would you really want to share such a horrible destiny with me? Camilla turned pale at those words. Litha's existence was amazing when considering it bit by bit, but when looking at his condition as a whole, it was utterly terrifying. Not even the most ancient creatures on Mogar knew what he was, and once they found out, anything could happen. They might revere him as a king or hunt him down like a monster, and in both cases, he would be the only one of his kind. Am I really sure this is the life I want? Am I willing to put my career and family at stake for this man, with whom I have so little in common, after knowing him for barely over 2 years? She thought for a while. Yes, I do. Camilla replied to both his question and her own while taking his hand that was still where she had left it. Then I don't want to be with anyone else. Lith stood up and walked around the table without letting her go. He took Camilla between his arms, enjoying her warmth and the always sweet scent of her hair. Lith felt guilty because even though it was her birthday, none of the presents he had prepared could compare with that she had just given to him. Her heartbeat, her perspiration, her eyes, and even the tone of her voice, everything about her said the same thing. Camilla had told him the truth, with no doubts nor hesitation. Weghan region, near the city of Famar, in the central part of the Griffin Kingdom. Floria Ernest looked at the barren landscape, wondering if the lack of vegetation was due to the presence of an undead plant dwelling in the vicinity or just Lady Spring being lazier than usual. Chapter 1003 Clever Plans Part 1. Are you in a bad mood again, or did that clearing grope your ass to glare at it like that? Freya Ernest asked from the back of her horse. I suspect there might be an undead nearby. Either that or the Winter King is not done with Famar yet. Floria waved at their surroundings while keeping an eye on the small caravan following them. Belen of Famar had gone from homeless to the middle class in just a few months by selling small mana crystals to the Mage Association. At first, no one had cared for him, thinking he had just been lucky since he brought only a few small gemstones worth barely a couple of silver pieces. But instead of squandering the money on gambling or alcohol, Belen had bought himself a small house and a field, bringing more crystals to the association each time his business needed funds to expand. Belen had been careful, picking only small amounts at a time and never exchanging them when at the counter there was a clerk who already knew him. Thanks to that, the supervisor noticed Belen's name being mentioned multiple times only when he revised all reports to compile the annual inventory. Instead of wasting time and resources to punish a victimless crime for which there was hardly proof, the supervisor made Belen an offer he couldn't refuse. Full immunity for the gemstones he had already sold and a hefty sum in exchange for the location of the unknown crystal vein. Belen had already collected everything he could find, so he happily agreed. The ex-vagrant got himself a pretty house and the supervisor a promotion. All that remained to do was for a squad of miners and crystal smiths to check the place. The crystals Belen had found were so small, and their grade so low that they might as well just be a lucky find. Sure, crystals rarely reached the surface, but when they did, it was the presence of green gemstones the mark of the motherlode, not that of red ones like those Belen sold. Preliminary reconnaissance of the terrain had failed to provide any clues, so the follow-up expedition required the utmost care. Crystal mines were priceless assets, especially with the ongoing struggle against the undead and the colonization plans for the Giera continent. The army suspected that either there was nothing to find and Belen had been extremely lucky, or he had just found the scraps left by illegal miners that would do anything to prevent the loss of their golden goose. With most of the regular troops busy keeping the order and eradicating the undead courts whenever they found them, the army was understaffed to the point of asking the infamous Captain Ernest for help. "Do you really still believe in those fairy tales?" Freya chuckled. "No, I don't. But I like having someone to curse when one of my men loses his toes to frostbite." Listening to her own words reminded Floria of her imminent discharge and made her sad. At that point, the only question was if it would have been an honorable or dishonorable discharge. "It's a good thing that you brought 2 professional healers along, then." Freya pointed at herself and their sister, Quilla, who was keeping her horse near the caravan. "Thanks for coming." "Stop thanking me. You are making me feel like the worst sister ever. I didn't drop anything to give you a hand, and I'm even getting paid for it." Freya tried and failed again to lighten the mood. Floria was tired of all the whispers and the mean looks that her presence caused due to the rumors Velandyrus had spread, so to make her accept her final mission as a captain, the army had been forced to agree to her 2 conditions. The first was that Floria refused to be the commanding officer. For all she knew, the mission might have as well been a setup to further compromise her situation. The second was that she had demanded the presence of Freya's Crystal Shield Guild. "Sorry, it's just that between all that happened to me and the cowardly attempt to pin on Mom the blame for Balkir's return, I'm in dire need of someone trustworthy. I can't believe I dated that piece of shit of Calion for almost 6 months," Floria said with a snarl. Freya's men were disguised as guards and the crystal smiths as miners. Without proof of the presence of a real vein, instead of sending elite units to scout the place, the army had opted for a softer approach. Officially, the caravan belonged to a prospector in search for precious metals. It justified the deployment of guards and excavation tools without the risk of drawing the attention of local criminals that might be involved in the illegal mining operation. Dimensional magic couldn't be used near crystal mines without the risk of triggering the detonation of the volatile gemstones. It was the reason why they were moving on horses rather than warp steps. To make matters worse, warping in the proximity of the mine would alert the enemies and leave them plenty of time to detonate the crystal veins before leaving. If the mine was in the hands of the undead, they would never let the kingdom reclaim it nor leave anything behind that could lead to their court. A massive explosion would kill 2 birds and several elite units with one spell. By the way, I still can't believe Mom wiped the floor with the ass of a guy that big. Freya said. Sure, she's well trained and everything, but Eierheim was no pushover either. Not to mention, he was much heavier and younger. Sometimes I can't help but wonder if Mom is just a monster of her own, or if she's secretly blood related to Lith. He's the only one I know who was that strong despite being that short back at the academy. None of the above, Floria whispered, forcing Freya to come closer while she conjured a hushed zone. She just cheated. A few days before the court was summoned, Mom got Manohar to rejuvenate her and give her what he calls a little extra boost. By the time they fought, she had practiced long enough to get accustomed to her younger and enhanced body. That Eierheim idiot had no chance from the start. Serves him right for deserting Dad after everything our father did for him. Freya's brain froze at the revelation. This doesn't make sense. How could Mom prepare in advance for a fight issued in response to an accusation that she had no way to know that Nuragor would have made? The only possible explanation is that she already knew the topic of the conversation because she's really responsible for the attacks and had everyone dancing in the palm of her hand. But that's preposterous. Yet it was the truth. The caves where the crystal veins were allegedly located was close enough to Famar that it only took a full day of travel to reach their entrance. The crystal smiths cast several detection arrays, but found no trace of enemies and crystals alike. I'm sorry, Captain Cordis, but so far the scouts were right. The crystals must be deep underground if there are any. Tlee Orman, the crystal smith foreman said. Don't worry, Tlee. It only makes our little covert operation smoother since we can place as many arrays as we want. Any suggestions, Captain Ernest? Chapter 1004 Clever Plans Part 2. Cordis Dast was a mage in his mid-30s, about 1.73 meters, 5 feet 8 inches, tall, with short black hair and ice-blue eyes. He found it hard to accept that such a young woman was taller than him and held his same rank, yet he managed to keep the edge off his voice. Negative, sir. Aside from setting the perimeter, there isn't much to do. Floria actually had an eerie feeling in her gut, but preferred to keep it to herself. If I tell them and I'm wrong, I'll be blamed for wasting everyone's time, while if I'm right, I'll be blamed for not being able to prevent whatever will happen. I already learned the rules of this game during the past year. To undermine my success, they'll make so that no matter the choice I make, it will be considered wrong in hindsight. I'll share my impressions only with Freya, so that if the worst happens and we save the day thanks to her guild mates, at least her career will flourish. She thought. Floria was tired of playing nice and let others ride her achievements to further their career while she was stuck as a captain. The moment Cordis dismissed the meeting, she joined her sisters for dinner, uncaring for all the disdainful looks the soldiers threw at her. Can you feel it too? Quilla asked. Even though she sat in front of the big campfire, she couldn't stop shivering. Yes, Floria said, while rubbing her arms to get rid of the chill running through her body. Feel what? Freya felt left out, so she hushed their surroundings even though it was considered a rude gesture. After spending a long time in Kulla, both Quilla and I became sensitive to huge mana fields. Floria said. It couldn't be stronger than that of the Academy. Freya raised an eyebrow in disbelief. I'm not saying that I don't believe you, just that it doesn't make much sense. Everyone here is a veteran of several battlefields, yet you're the only ones affected. What makes Kulla so special? It's not a matter of how strong the field is, but how hostile it is. Quilla explained. The mana reactor, the golems, and even the gates, everything was designed to keep people out. We didn't notice it at first, but after a while, you feel like there's a blade constantly pocking at your throat. The good news is that whatever it is, the source of the mana field has nothing of the pure hatred and suffering that permeated Kulla. The bad news is that these kinds of things are never natural. Floria said. After killing her first human at barely 15 during an Academy's exam, surviving Balkier, Nalier, and the forbidden magic ritual in Xantia, Freya had learned that, for a mage, optimism was the quickest way to the grave. She doubled the guard around the camp and had her guildmates keep everything they might need at hand in the case the enemy trapped them inside a dimensional ceiling array. The army soldiers sneered at the excessive safety precautions the crystal shield took, considering them a bunch of paranoid rookies. The mercenaries, instead, considered the soldiers a bunch of morons. Not only had their guild master yet to fail them, but she had also negotiated for that mission a payment equal to what the soldiers would earn in a month. The night passed with no incidents, just as Floria expected. Trained opponents act completely differently from regular bandits, sis. She said to Freya during their guard shift. The three of them had decided to not get separated from each other, no matter what, so they did everything together. Even if someone was expecting our arrival, they will not leave obvious traps to not reveal their presence until they are ready to strike. Usually, the first day is all about scouting the number of enemies, their tactics, and their defenses. There's a lot that you can discover about a group just by looking at how they set up their camp. A smart soldier will not employ cookie-cut strategies, but adapt those they are more skilled with to the situation at hand. Have your guildmates scout more than guard, so that the enemy can't observe us freely, and rather than setting up complex arrays, focus on simple but annoying formations, like barriers. This way, during the first attack, the strong energy field will be hard to take down and screw the enemy's tempo, giving you the time to devise a proper counter. The greatest flaw of being a bodyguard is that you always play on defense, reacting rather than striking first. Floria drew a sketch of their surroundings, marking the points where she would put scouts if she was in charge of attacking the caravan. Thanks, sis. Did you learn this stuff at the boot camp or at the officer training course? Freya was mostly self-taught about strategy, And even though escort missions were the most common, they were also those she hated the most. Crushing the enemy meant nothing if the client died or the goods were stolen in the chaos of the battle. Her favorite assignments were clearing dungeons and capturing criminals, preferably the dead or alive kind, because they allowed her to go all out. No, I learned from experience. The boot camp is all about teamwork and basic strategies, whereas the officer course is focused on war tactics. The problem with standard strategies is that not only any cultured enemy knows them as well, but also no battle plan survives the encounter with the enemy. There are too many things that can go wrong. One person makes a mistake, and the entire formation crumbles. Floria and Freya sighed, while thinking about the teammates they had lost over time due to bad luck, carelessness, or incompetence. You know, I can't help but think back when we were at the academy, following Lith and his paranoid multi-layered plans. Freya said, even when one of them failed, there was always a contingency plan, and in the end, we all came out alive, no matter the danger. That's because Lith is so strong that even when we were taken by surprise, he'd buy us enough time to regroup and strategize. On top of that, we were no pushover either and were capable of executing his plans down to a T. Floria said, Gods, I miss those days so badly. Freya updated her men according to Floria's suggestion and restored the hush zone around them. Back then, grades were my greatest daily worry. I had no responsibility, and the future was something to look forward to rather than be afraid of. I can't believe I was in such a rush to grow up. That makes the two of us. Floria sighed. Make it three, Quilla said, finally brave enough to join the conversation. It lives, her sisters said in unison and ruffled Quilla's hair, making her swear as a truck driver while she tried to make them stop treating her like a kid. The moment didn't last long, but it took the chill off their hearts. The camp awoke before sunrise and had breakfast while it was still dark to not waste a single second of precious sunlight. The members of the expedition were split into teams, each one comprised of miners, royal prospectors, and bodyguards. Royal prospectors were not just crystalsmiths, but also skilled wardens and structural engineers. Chapter 1005 Talent and Experience Part 1. Royal prospectors would use arrays to detect the presence of enemies and crystals alike. Thanks to earth magic, they could safely dig new tunnels or expand the natural network of caves. Then, it would be the miners' job to dig around according to the information provided by the prospectors. In their original state, mana crystals didn't like magic. Using powerful spells in their proximity could easily make them explode and trigger a chain reaction that would wipe out the entire crystal vein. The tools the miners used were enchanted so to improve their durability and efficiency. A single worker could dig faster than a drill, but with crystals, skill and finesse were more important than speed. Gods, give me strength. Quilla turned pale while entering the tunnels. Since when are you afraid of enclosed spaces? Freya could understand if the memories of Quilla still haunted her sister, but she knew for a fact that until a few months ago, Quilla had no such problem. After everything that had happened at the White Griffin, Quilla had lost her naivety and put up a thick skin. After escaping from the ODI ruins, she didn't lose a single night's sleep and visited several underground ruins. That and the fact that Quilla didn't answer the question made her sisters worry. The caves were dark and damp, bearing no trace of previous mining activity. The prospectors removed the asperities in the ground and made it coarse so to provide a firm foothold. After a few hours, the expedition had yet to find any sign of mana crystals or of living creatures dwelling underground. Before exploring deeper, the prospectors had to safely enlarge the tunnels and stabilize the complex while the miners collected rock samples that would be later studied at the camp with alchemical equipment. Floria had no intention of sitting idly, so she listened to the scouts' reports, and then she took flight to study the area from above. Based on what she had seen so far, Floria ruled out the hypothesis of an illegal mining operation at the hand of human bandits. No matter how skilled or cautious they might be, humans were bound to leave traces of their passage behind. They needed light to see in the dark, food to keep their strength, and tools to work. After long hours of hard work in the mines, even if they still had the energy to close the passages, they were bound to make mistakes. Undead, on the other hand, needed nothing but a safe haven where to hide during the day. Day after day, they would make mistakes as well, but to find them one had to think outside of the box. The entrance to the caves was located in a small clearing that the prospectors had widened at their arrival, but the surrounding terrain was hilly, leaving a lot of places for the undead to hide. All officers of the Griffin Kingdom had thoroughly studied undead ever since the invasion had become public knowledge, and Floria was no exception. First, she checked the surrounding area for kilometers to make sure that the lack of greenery wasn't limited only to the caves. Once that she ruled out the presence of undead plants, she marked all the hills big enough to hide the food stocks that such a strenuous operation would require. The undead could lay almost anywhere as long as they were shielded from sunlight, but their victims were another story entirely. They needed food, water, and space. Be them humans or beasts, once they turned into undead, it was their need to keep the source of their nourishment close to betray their presence. By the time she was done, the sun was about to set. Floria shared her findings with Captain Cortis and Freya while dining together. My suggestion is to send teams to perform life-sensing arrays tomorrow morning. Undead can dig deep holes for themselves, but the living need air to breathe, she said. It's an excellent plan, Captain Ernest, but I'm afraid we lack the necessary manpower to put it into action. The wardens can either scout the area or expand the caves, and I'm inclined to prioritize the latter. Cortis said with a gentle smile. I believe you're being overly cautious. We have yet to find any trace of crystals, let alone enemies. Delaying the exploration would just be a waste of time, especially if it turns out there are no crystal veins. Every day we spend here is a day when our troops can't help those really in need. If and when we find the vein, I'll authorize your plan. Until then, speed is of the essence. Yeah, too bad that by then it will be too late. Freya said. Once we find the crystals, there will be too many assets to defend, and our forces will be spread too thin to be effective against a well-executed attack. I'll send my men on site first thing in the morning. They are no wardens, but luckily, life-sensing arrays are simple, and such a huge group of life forces can be detected even by a half-baked spell. Her words made Cortis's face turn into stone. I need to speak with you in private, Captain Ernest. He stood up, gesturing her to follow him. Whatever you might have to say, you can do it in front of my sister. This is my last mission, and we have the same rank. You can't order me around, and even if you report me, it will not change my situation one bit. Floria's flat tone only made the man turn to a brighter shade of purple. Fine. When I asked you if you had any suggestions, you said you had none. Yet the next thing you did was to ignore protocol and go exploring on your own. Now you come back with your crazy theories that your sister is eager to indulge. This way, if something happens, you'll take credit and I'll pass for an incompetent. To make matters worse, if soldiers and mercenaries follow different orders, the teamwork will be disrupted and the trust in the chain of command will falter. You have all rights to be angry with the army, but that doesn't authorize you to undermine my authority nor compromise the mission. You're not a ranger like your friend. You're supposed to play ball. He managed to keep his voice cold but polite. You are incompetent, otherwise you would have thought about those issues yourself. I didn't share my thoughts earlier because I'm tired of others taking credit for my ideas, just like I refuse to lead the mission because I usually get assigned to me undisciplined soldiers who ignore my orders and then blame me for their failures. I asked for Freya's guild because private contractors prioritize survival over dumb pride or political plays. All the money on Mogur is pointless if they are too dead to spend it. Floria said while looking at him straight in the eye. Bottom line, I'm done playing ball. The mission will succeed because I'm here, but the number of casualties will depend on how badly you play your cards, and it will affect your career. This time, I won't be anyone's scapegoat. Cortis froze in place as his future suddenly looked dark. He had gladly accepted the mission, planning to use Floria as a crutch. If things went well, they would have shared the merits, and maybe he would have made connections with the powerful Erna's household. Chapter 1006 Talent and Experience Part 2. Worst case scenario, he would have pinned the blame on her and taken credit for saving the mission. Floria, however, had cut off all of his safe routes. As second in command, she had to step in only in the case he wasn't up to the task. On top of that, Floria had yet to give a single order. She only provided intel and suggestions, letting Cortis make all decisions. Yet with absolute power came the full responsibility. Freya's mercenaries only made Cortis's situation worse by offering a benchmark. The more successful they would be, the more incompetent he would appear. Before he could find a proper retort, Floria and Freya walked out of the command tent and joined Quilla around the campfire. Do you really think there are undead here? Freya cast hush so often that no one glared at her anymore. Honestly, no. But checking the area just takes a bit of time, whereas if I'm wrong, things could get out of hand quickly. I'm okay with this being my last mission as a captain, not with it being the last thing I do, Floria said. The following day, Captain Cordis stuck to his plan and tasked the prospectors with expanding the caves in the hope to be done with the mission as soon as possible. If they kept not finding anything, the expedition could leave, while if they located the crystal veins, the High Command would send reinforcements to secure the area, making Cordis's job foolproof. Freya, instead, followed Floria's advice and ordered the members of the Crystal Shield Guild to report every 5 minutes, no matter if they found something or not. Undead attacked as fast and silently as magical beasts. If someone disappeared, knowing their last known position would be of crucial importance. Quilla had still a long way to go before becoming capable of fighting hand-to-hand, so she helped the prospectors with her limited knowledge of arrays and her keen mana perception. There's something behind this wall, she said to Tlee Orman, a plump woman in her late 50s with red hair and green eyes, who was the prospector foreman. Are you sure? Tlee had spent more time inside crystal mines than at her own home, which gave her plenty of experience in the field. I'm sorry, but according to my arrays, there is just more rock behind that rock. Do me a favor and humor me, please. Quilla was certain that the eerie feeling she had sensed since the day of their arrival came from there, along with a mana pressure so intense that made her eyes water. Whatever this is, I'm going to face it head-on, she thought, tired of living in fear and second-guessing herself. All successful mages are confident, like Manohar. Scratch that, he's not confident, more like insane. Everything for an earnest. Tlee chuckled and gave Quilla a curtsy. Just tell your father I'm still waiting for my staff. Quilla felt embarrassed at the idea of having exploited her family name and was still stuttering an apology when the wall opened, revealing a second network of caves that went deeper underground. I take back everything I just said. Tlee used her communication amulet to call her colleagues. You're wasted as a healer. Are you sure you're not interested in becoming a royal prospector? Quilla stuttered some more until the pressure coming from the new caves was overshadowed by something worse. The ground in front of the two women rippled as if someone had thrown a pebble on the surface of a lake, and a handsome man came out of it. He looked to be around his mid-30s and was about 1.8 meters, 5 feet 11 inches, tall, with wheat blonde hair and gray eyes. The man was wearing a tailor-made white silk shirt and leather pants that emphasized his muscular build. His goatee gave his delicate features a manly and wise appearance that almost made Quilla miss the fact that he was holding a sword in his right hand and a heart in his left. Almost. Nor, do your thing, he said apparently to no one while he threw both items in the air and dived back into the ground. A ghoul and a mage slayer. Quilla yelled inside her amulet after recognizing them both from the description Lith had given her. A ghoul was an undead that was free to move during the day as long as it avoided sunlight. Contrary to the lore, their appearance was no different from that of a human, at least until they ate. Ghouls needed to feed upon living flesh to sustain their existence, and were capable of swimming through solid rock, just like Naurant. That, coupled with regenerative abilities on par with trolls, made them very hard to kill. Both the sword and the heart stopped in mid-air, releasing an orange mist that quickly assumed the humanoid features and red eyes typical of a mage slayer. They were usually born from the dying body of a powerful swordsman. In their new form, they would be unable to use fake magic, but their undead nature combined with their skills allowed them to channel the elemental energy into their swordplay. Mage slayers weren't true mages, but they were able to cast spells without any chant or hand signs. They just needed to perform a series of attacks to unleash all kinds of elemental attacks up to Tier 3. On top of that, magic was their source of nourishment, making all kinds of direct spells useless against them, no matter their tier. Both fake and true mages had a hard time facing someone with infinite stamina that could use magic by simply swinging their blades in close combat. It was the reason why Rizzo the Ghoul didn't even bother attacking. Alone against so many mages, it was suicide for a ghoul, but a feast for a mage slayer. The only weak points Nor had were her heart and darkness magic. The former held her blood core, but she could freely move it inside the orange mist, making it invisible, while the latter was too slow to be a threat to someone as nimble as her. Quilla cursed her bad luck and blinked away while grabbing Tlee. Nor's blade only hit the air, making the mist that comprised her body ripple in annoyance before she moved on to her next target. A few prospectors panicked and unleashed the spells stored in their rings, providing the Mage Slayer with the first decent meal in weeks. The orange mist absorbed the elemental energy while the heart within fed upon the mana and stored it inside the blood core. Nor's body recovered part of its human features, allowing her to smile as a thank you while she lunged at the idiotic mages in the hope to receive seconds. Dimensional magic as well? You really are wasted as a healer. Tlee stared at Quilla in awe. Despite the fact that they were far from being safe, all the royal prospector could think about was how to convince the young mage to switch careers. Tlee had studied at one of the 6 great academies as well, but she only obtained the warden specialization. She had never been capable of manipulating and fusing 6 elements at the same time, so dimensional magic was beyond her reach, and with it most of the combat roles the association had to offer. Luckily, Tlee had succeeded in crystal smithing. That together with her warden abilities had granted her a wealthy and comfortable life. Chapter 1007 The Mark of a Genius Part 1. Both crystal smithing and dimensional magic were considered lesser specializations, but while the former was just treated as the last chance out of mediocrity for those who failed at achieving a real specialization, the latter was considered the mark of a truly powerful mage. None of those who graduated from an academy would be graded above B if they failed at dimensional magic, no matter how good their marks in the other disciplines were. Thanks, but no thanks, Quilla replied, even before Tlee could think about a decent pitch. As long as she kept Tlee close. Blinking 2 people cost the same as 1, which was of paramount importance since the spell had limited range, and reaching the safety of sunlight required a few of them. Ghouls and mage slayers could move during the day, but the sun was still their bane. Unfortunately for the 2 women, Rizzo wasn't the only ghoul in the cave, just like Nor wasn't the only mage slayer. Teams of 2 were scattered along the walls, with the ghouls unleashing their partners before hiding underground and waiting for an opportunity to attack. The mage slayers had been dropped on critical junctions of the caves, forcing those who tried to escape to face them no matter the route they took. The ghouls, instead, had sealed all the entrances with earth magic and kept them that way. Fuck me sideways. Quilla found a mage slayer in the middle of her path, and all the exits closed. To her, all tunnels looked the same, and without a clear mental image of her destination, blink was useless. She could use warp steps to get outside, but casting it required time, something that the undead weren't willing to allow her. The camp wasn't faring much better. A horde of skeletons and zombies had popped out of the ground, surrounding the arrays and preventing anyone from getting in or out. On the one hand, lesser undead were brainless creatures that couldn't use any magical tool because they were incapable of imprinting them. But on the other, to them the sun meant nothing. Only the strong barriers that Freya had her guild set up in accordance with Floria's strategy had kept the expedition from being wiped out in one wave. The various elemental blocking arrays were useless against creatures that fought solely using their bodies. This is a diversion, Floria yelled at the top of her lungs, to make sure that everyone heard her. Their real aim is to kill the prospectors. Without them, no matter if we win or lose this battle, the mission will fail. She hated the fact that not only speaking made her a target, but also prevented her from casting spells. Panic, however, was the greatest weapon of the undead. Prospectors suck at fighting, and soldiers need teamwork to beat physically superior opponents. We couldn't assign many bodyguards because of the limited space inside the caves, and because it was more practical to keep reinforcements on standby. Whoever planned this, he's good, Floria thought. I'm going in to rescue Quilla. Can you hold the camp by yourself? Freya had just finished recalling all the members of the Crystal Shield Guild and was now using her custom-made communication amulet as a map. Orion had planted tracker spells inside the armor of all his children, allowing Freya to pinpoint Quilla. On top of that, on Freya's request, Orion had added to her amulet the camera feature. By scanning a place, She could conjure its hologram to serve as a memory aid. Even the Master of Space needed to know her destination, and the camera allowed her to return to places with no landmarks or that she was unfamiliar with. Useless to say, her communication amulet was a very expensive prototype. Yes, but I could use some help. A powerful explosion made the ground quake and the barrier falter, forcing Floria to start chanting. I'll get back as soon as I can. If you finish first, join me. Freya focused on the hologram in front of her to jog her memory. She couldn't reach a place just by seeing its picture. Warping didn't just require to combine all the elements together. It was also a matter of time and space awareness. Recreating a place in her mind, while weaving complex spells at the same time, was incredibly difficult. Lith usually had no trouble doing it only, because even though he rarely remembered even what he had for breakfast, Solus did. Using someone else's memory to cast dimensional and offensive spells together was something only cursed objects could do. Good gods, some of the skeletons have their ribcage and skull stuffed with fire seeds. One of them was enough to make the array tremble. You have to stop them before they break the barrier and kill us all, Captain Cordis ordered. Fire seeds were fireballs in a candy-like shell that exploded on contact. Even lesser undead could use such an alchemical tool. How exactly, Captain Obvious? More than one soldier replied, too desperate to care about insubordination charges. Except for the darkness element, magic was nigh useless against the undead. Fire, ice, and lightning bolts caused them no pain, and only massive spells could inflict them real damage. Air blades produced clean cuts that were mended simply by joining the severed limbs. All soldiers used their wands to bombard with darkness magic the mass of skeletons and zombies hammering at the barrier with their bodies, but there were just too many. On top of that, from time to time a fire seed-loaded skeleton would cut through the ranks and threaten to bring down the barrier. The elite units were with the prospectors, leaving in the camp mostly soldiers with alchemical tools. Being split from their main force made them incapable to deploy their best strategies, and a panicking officer didn't help. That's why Floria activated her Tier 5 Mage Knight spell, Death Bastion, instead of going on the offensive. Death Bastion would usually conjure a stone wall infused with darkness magic, but she turned it upside down, using the wall to instantly create a deep trench all around the barrier. The lesser undead fell with the grace of bricks and blindly followed their orders, climbing the rock walls to resume their attack, just like Floria had planned. The entirety of the trench was brimming with darkness magic that sapped their strength and turned most of the undead to dust before they could get out. With a clear path to victory in front of them, the soldiers didn't miss the opening and focused their attacks on the creatures near the top of the trench. It helped Floria to keep the undead contained and left a clear line of sight of the battlefield. Now it was possible to see the ground ripple and the explosive skeleton coming out of it in time to make it explode at a safe distance. Half of you, eyes on the ground. Ghouls fear sunlight, but we provide them with plenty of shade. They could drop all kinds of nasty surprises right outside the barrier. Don't focus only on the skeletons and prepare for the next wave. The other half use this time to put fresh crystals to fuel the barrier and make sure the arrays are intact. Once the units resumed working like a well-oiled machine, Floria poured more mana in her spell and forced the trench to close. Chapter 1008 The Mark of a Genius Part 2. Death Bastion turned into a vice that ground skeletons into dust and zombies into meat paste. After losing their infantry, the ghouls stopped the attack and retreated. The barrier prevented them from sneaking inside the camp from below, just like the sun made attacking from above suicidal. This is all your fault, Captain Cordis said before people could have a clear idea of what had happened. If you didn't order the mercenaries to leave the camp, this wouldn't have happened. Your thirst for glory left us open to an attack. Floria's right hook put an end to the argument, breaking Cordis's jaw, cheekbone, and sending him tumbling on the ground until a carriage stopped him. In case you've already forgotten, there's still people in the caves who need our help. All those who are combat-ready follow me. We need to open that door. She looked at the sky, hoping to see the Freya's guildmates back. They were all mages and Floria could use some backup. Yet she couldn't afford to wait and charged at the entrance now sealed by stone. A Tier 3 earth magic spell, Implosion, made the wall collapse safely, only for it to reform a second later. It would have been long enough for Floria to blink inside. But doing it would also mean to leave the soldiers without a leader nor orders to follow. Gods, I wish Lith was here. He would find the ghouls in the walls in no time with life vision, whereas I have to waste time casting an array, she thought, hoping that Freya could buy her enough time. Meanwhile, inside the caves, Quilla was fighting for her life. Mage Slayers were true to their name and required a talented fighter to beat them. Until that moment, the elite soldiers had managed to prevent casualties by teaming up and drinking potions. The former allowed them to overpower the undead with numbers, and the latter to bridge most of the gap in their physical prowess. Yet the situation was slowly getting worse. Mage Slayers wouldn't get tired, and while they couldn't be hurt unless their heart was hit, every small cut the mage soldiers suffered would drain their energies faster. The prospectors were wardens, and arrays not only required a long cast time, but would also affect their allies as well. A melee fight was too chaotic to throw a random spell and hope it would hit the right target. Even the soldiers that used rings or wands to instantly conjure darkness bullets ended up hitting only the orange mist that comprised the Slayers' bodies. To make matters worse, the undead were capable of conjuring spells with no notice, simply by swinging their weapons. Think, Quilla, think. It's an easy problem. All I have to do is to reveal their hearts without using magic, since it would strengthen them, nor swordplay, because I suck at it. Her thoughts ooze sarcasm. Messing with the ground is not an option because they are frigging gas. Air magic would blow the mist away if it didn't feed on mana. What the heck can I do? The only physical parts a mage slayer has are the heart and the weapon. A crazy idea formed in her head as she dodged a stray lightning bolt and took her Royal Forge Master wand out of her pocket. Keep him still for a second, Quilla yelled at the three soldiers surrounding the undead, who was actually female. They already had a hard time dodging the blade of the mage slayer and the spells it conjured, but the mage soldiers obeyed nonetheless. Quilla wore the uniform of the assistant professors of the White Griffin Academy, so they assumed that she had to be competent. Moreover, all their attacks until that moment had failed, leaving the mage soldiers open to suggestions. Nor emitted a sound that sounded like a sneer and resumed her assault. Even though a mage slayer's body was made of mist, the strength behind each of their strikes was greater than that of any mortal, and each one of them in life had been a blade master. If not for the body-enhancing potions the soldiers had drunk, they wouldn't even be able to follow Nor's movements. The mage soldiers could only dodge or deflect because the last person to attempt to block had their wrist broken on impact. One of them moved behind the undead, unleashing a Tier 2 darkness spell aimed to her head that dispersed the mist. It dealt no damage but disrupted the mage slayer's perceptions enough for the other two to block her floating blade with a scissor maneuver. Quilla knew that even by joining their efforts they couldn't hold for long against an unrelenting enemy. Yet a second was all she needed. A silvery strand that resembled a thin whip came out of her wand and wrapped the blade. When Quilla activated her Forge Master spell, Clean Slate, which traveled through the wand and its strand, affecting the magical blade as if Quilla was touching it. Clean Slate generated a combined pulse of light and darkness magic that would temporarily short-circuit the imprint on a magical item. In the case of the Mage Slayer, her blade was her own life. Contrary to what many believed, the weapon of a Mage Slayer would become part of their bodies after they were turned into undead. The blood core and the pseudo core were linked, allowing the enchanted blade to grow in strength over time along with its master. The magical short-circuit caused the life force of the Mage Slayer to flood the blade in the attempt to jump-start its pseudo core. Yet until the effects of Clean Slate faded, their bond would remain broken. The orange mist suddenly disappeared, and without its cover, it took Quilla but a Tier 1 spell to destroy Nor's heart. Forget the hearts and destroy their weapons. That's their real weak point. The mage soldiers switched their blades with maces, so that each hit delivered or taken would weaken the thin weapons the undead used. Good to know, sis. Freya appeared right beside Quilla, enveloped by the blue aura of full guard and the golden sparkles of light from her personal Tier 5 spell, Dimensional Ruler. The former was a common Mage Knight spell that created a spherical blue aura with a radius of 1.65 meters, 5.41 feet, around its caster. Thanks to full guard, a Mage Knight had no blind spots. Whatever entered the sphere would be detected, allowing Freya to counterattack and dodge with surgical precision without even looking. The latter, instead, did exactly what its name implied, bending the rules of the battlefield to her whims. Used in combination, they granted Freya a full dimensional awareness and a mastery over space limited solely by her imagination. The Mage Slayers didn't like Quilla disclosing a secret that had gone unnoticed for millennia, and were determined to not leaving any witness of the revelation alive. Even beasts and awakened were unaware of how deep the bond between the undead and their weapons were. In front of a beating heart of flesh and a piece of metal that could be as durable as orichalcum, no one ever bothered attacking the weapon. Those strong or skilled enough to find the heart would triumph, while everyone else would die. That was what the Mage Slayers considered the natural order of things, and they would do anything to keep it that way. Chapter 1009 Awakening Power Part 1. Another undead unleashed a ring of fire that forced his opponents to step back and used that opening to lunge at Quilla. Freya pushed her away in the nick of time, taking the hit in her stead. The long sword pierced her chest until the hilt struck her bosom and produced a silvery sound when hitting the orichalcum of her boosted skinwalker armor. A less skilled opponent would have rejoiced to see the blade protruding from her back in its full length, but the Mage Slayer shivered in fear instead. It had been too easy. The lunge had encountered no resistance passing through the orichalcum, flesh, and bones. It didn't make sense, especially the fact that not a single inch of the blade was covered in blood nor inside her body. The undead knew his weapon like the back of his hand and couldn't miss that too many things didn't add up. He tried to pull the blade out, but it was too late. The dimensional fissure created in front of Freya that led to her back closed, breaking the weapon in half. The Mage Slayer shrieked in pain as he used all of his might to regenerate the blade before it was too late. His efforts made the heart brim with mana, revealing its position and allowing Freya to turn the undead into ashes with a flick of her rapier. That's one. Freya bolted forward while the golden sparkles of Dimensional Ruler coated her weapon. She unleashed a volley of plague arrows, uncaring of the mage soldiers that the undead used to cover her line of fire like meat shields. The Mage Slayers shrugged and performed the sword movements required to conjure a fireball. The explosion would hurt their companions since feeding upon undead magic was akin to poison, but they couldn't let her get close. Suddenly the plague arrows and the soldiers switched, forcing the Mage Slayers to focus on dodging them or becoming Swiss cheese. Freya blinked between two of them, knowing that her own mana couldn't hurt her. 2 and 3. She slashed at her enemies who instinctively blocked, only for the golden aura surrounding the rapier to cut the space and leave an unstable fissure in front of them. The explosion hit them from the front and the arrows from behind, while Freya blinked back beside Quilla and scathed. Dimensional Ruler was mana expensive, but as long as it was active, all of her dimensional spells had no casting time. The Mage Slayer that was about to attack Quilla stopped abruptly and focused on Freya so much that she didn't notice Quilla's silver string hitting her blade until it was too late. The other Mage Slayers didn't like how things were going, and since the prospectors had already revealed the secret of their blades through the communication amulets, the undead considered the battle to be lost. The Mage Slayers tapped the walls with the hilt of their weapons, signaling their allies to come and rescue them. The ghouls arrived, but not the way the Mage Slayers were expecting. While weaving the life-sensing array, the world in front of Floria's eyes had changed. Everything had turned into shades of gray, even the sky. The only colors she could see came from her own equipment, her soldiers, and some humanoid blots in the stone wall in front of her. Fire at will, Floria said after using first magic to imitate the effects of the array and marking the enemy's position with wisps of light. She stabbed at the closest enemy with her estoc, piercing through the solid rock as if it was paper and unleashing the spells stored within the reaver. Orion had enchanted her estoc with the ability to hold spells on its own. Reaver relieved Floria from the mental burden of keeping several spells at the ready required and prevented them from fading in the case she lost her focus. Unlike a magic holding ring, the estoc couldn't hold spells indefinitely, but only for a short while. Yet battles would rarely last long, and having the temporary equivalent of several magic holding rings of all tiers had countless applications. The good thing about hiding inside the ground was that it concealed the ghouls from sight, and no normal weapon nor element could affect them. On the other hand, however, once they were discovered, they were sitting ducks. Swimming through the ground made them slow compared to someone that could walk or run, and also made them extremely vulnerable to earth magic. Floria's reaver made the rock surrounding one of the ghouls implode on him, killing him on the spot. The soldiers followed her lead, using earth magic wands to smoke out the other ghouls and shatter their bodies. The broken forms of the shocked undead crawled like worms, trying to buy enough time to heal. A ghoul's regenerative abilities were on par with trolls, allowing their injuries to mend a split second after they were opened. On top of that, ghouls could use the darkness element in its true magic form like most undead and the earth element due to their natural affinity with it. Fake or true, however, all spells needed to be cast. The undead had at the ready only support spells and the means for sneak attacks since they were supposed to be invisible. The sudden turn of events left them with nothing but their unnatural physical prowess and first magic. The former wasn't worth much due to their multiple fractures, while the latter couldn't do much against the powerful Tier 3 darkness spells stored inside the alchemical tools. Seal earth magic and none of them will escape. Floria ordered the prospectors that were doing their best to not get in the way of the reinforcements and to support them however they could. The prospectors nodded and started to chant in unison, greatly shortening the array's casting time. Floria smirked, seeing the panicked expression on the mage slayers' faces as they realized they were on a ticking clock. To make matters worse for them, without the ghouls using their willpower to block all forms of earth magic from inside the caves, the prospectors were now free to use simple spells to open holes into the ceiling and the walls to let the sunlight in. It created safe areas where the undead couldn't step in and greatly limited their movements. Floria ignored the weak darkness spell the hapless ghoul threw at her, letting it crash against her armor, and pierced his chest with the reaver, unleashing a darkness blast that turned it into ashes. The limbs and the head were still alive, a clear sign that she had missed the heart, allowing the ghoul to regenerate the missing torso at a speed visible at the naked eye. I suck at lotteries. Floria used a simple air spell to send the 5 body parts rolling on a sunny area, where they caught fire as if she had thrown them inside a furnace. By the time the ghoul was burned to cinders, however, the others had already recuperated and were now fighting side by side with the mage slayers. An undead swordmaster lunged at Floria to keep her from casting any more spells and put her on the defense. He was shocked by the strength with which she easily parried the attack, changing the path of the blade and ruining the spell he had been weaving to complement the follow-up. Chapter 1010 Awakening Power Part 2. Floria sidestepped and quickly jabbed with her left, producing a flurry of fists fast and strong enough to scatter the orange mist at its passage. There it is, she said, revealing the position of the floating heart. The undead had yet to recover his stance when Floria's blade locked his own in place while her left hand grabbed the vital organ, squashing it like grape. We're dead if we stay here. Do you trust me? A ghoul asked her mage slayer partner as the tide of the battle turned grimmer with each passing second. The silent undead just shook his head, making her curse. Well, too bad. She grabbed both the blade and the heart before throwing herself against the nearest wall while keeping them close to her chest. Her earth magic made it crumble and sunlight made her burn. The ghoul used her body's regenerative abilities to survive and protect her partner long enough to plunge into the ground again, leaving the other undead in even hotter waters. Thanks for the assist, sis. Now for my next trick. Freya spread her hands, opening a dimensional door in front of each hole in the walls and capturing the sunlight. She also placed their exit points so to light the entirety of the caves. Sunlight was the only thing that could make undead experience pain as if they were still alive. All the spells the ghouls had prepared were lost due to the sudden agony breaking their focus. At the same time, the orange mist that comprised the bodies of the mage slayers dissipated, revealing their weak spot. What followed was a slaughter that ended so fast that the prospectors never got to complete their earth-blocking array. You're amazing, Quilla said while looking at Freya in awe. Many nodded in agreement, like parrots. The battle had been so desperate and chaotic that its abrupt ending made the survivor feel as if Freya had turned the tables all by herself. Well, that's true. She accepted the compliment, but she also didn't like to hog all the glory. Both her sisters needed a victory. Dimensional magic is amazing. That's why it's usually sealed first, but don't forget that it does no damage by itself. It's all about exploiting opportunities, and without the two of you, everyone here would be dead. It was you, Quilla, who discovered the existence of the Mage Slayer's second weak point and saved our lives. Without you, the best I could have done was to get you guys to safety outside. Also, without Foria bringing reinforcements and breaking down the walls, I wouldn't have had the sunlight my spell needed to be effective. At her words, soldiers and prospectors burst into applause, making Quilla blush, while Floria only looked sterner. I hate to ruin the mood, but we'll have the time to pat ourselves in the back after we take care of the wounded and the fallen. Prospectors, take care of the camp first, and then fix this mess later. We need some way to keep today's events from repeating. Soldiers, leave no man behind. I want everyone present and accounted for. I'll call for backup and report our situation. She pointed at the bodies lying on the floor, belonging to those too slow to react to the surprise attack. Some were covered in blood, and it was too late for them, but others were still begging for help. Her words swept away the smiles of the survivors who now cursed themselves for forgetting about their fallen comrades. After making sure that there was nothing for which she could make the difference, Floria turned around and took her army amulet out of her lily-shaped dimensional pendant. Was that really Litha's doing? She thought while caressing the golden necklace. Did he really find a way to uphold the promise he made me the day of Mom's birthday, and to fight by my side despite the distance separating us? She had no idea that what she had experienced wasn't a miracle, but a sign of her self-awakening process. Captain Ernest, why the emergency call? General Barian replied immediately, eager to offer his help. After Lith had become an archmage despite the opposition of the head of the Mage Association, the already shaky ground had become shakier for the association, tipping the power scale in favor of the army again. If Barian managed to keep Captain Ernest from quitting and restored her reputation, he would also clean the only stain that the army bore to the royals' eyes. Barian still longed to take over the association and obtain the authority to convert merits into noble titles. That way, soldiers could finally receive the award they deserved, and all mages would become subordinates of the army. On top of that, gaining the favor of the Ernest household, a leading figure in both organizations, would be a priceless asset to his career. Floria explained everything to him, from the lack of vegetation she had noticed to the ambush they had suffered. Hearing so many crucial details for the first time snapped him out of his reverie and pissed him off to the point that a lesser man would have warped there to kill Cordis with his bare hands. Excellent work, Captain Ernest. Barian's face was a stone mask and his tone was unchanged, but Floria could notice the throbbing vein on his neck. Where is Captain Cordis now? He's still unconscious, sir. I gave priority to securing the camp and treating the wounded. After that, I'll secure the caves, give you a precise number of the casualties, and only then do I plan to wake him up. Conflicting orders would slow us down and leave us vulnerable to further attacks. She said, there will be no such thing. Barian's smile reached his ears, yet it held no joy. Please, fix Captain Cordis's wounds and put him through. I want you both to listen. Floria shivered at those words. The way Barian spoke reminded her of the times when Floria was still a child, and Orion reassured her that an abusive, well-renewed teacher or instructor wouldn't bother her anymore. Usually, those people disappeared, and no one heard from them ever again. There were even rumors saying that, after amputating their limbs, Orion kept them alive inside barrels filled with nutrients, condemning them to a lifetime of agony. During quiet nights, sometimes, it was possible to hear groans of pain coming from the walls of House Ernest, making the domestic staff very respectful of their masters and wary of the children. Actually, Orion didn't like keeping pets, and the groans were due to Journey bringing her work home. But that's a story for another day. How dare you assaulting a fellow officer? Cordis said the moment he regained consciousness, even before his vision cleared enough to recognize Floria. I'll report everything and have you court-martialed. I will. You will shut up and listen. That's an order, Captain. Barian cut him short with a voice so cold that it turned the fire of Cordis's rage into chilling fear. Barian then repeated Floria's report with his own words, asking Cordis to confirm or deny its single parts with just a yes or no. It left the hapless captain no time to make up excuses nor a way to justify his actions. Lies would be easily exposed, digging him a deeper grave. None of the witnesses would lie to a general to protect a captain, and after how Floria had brilliantly resolved the crisis, Cordus doubted there was a single person in the camp on his side. Chapter 10-11 Change of Leadership Part 1. I have many things to say, but too little time, so I'll limit myself to one thing. A captain that has the guts to issue the "stop the enemy" order instead of formulating a strategy is worth to be added to the list of jokes the association tells about the army. Captain Floria, you're now in charge of the mission. Since I'm forced to change plans due to Cordus's manifest incompetence in leadership, I'll invoke the second-in-command protocol. Now put the prospector's foreman through. I need to inform her of my decisions. Reinforcements are already on their way. Varian said. Those words made Cordus's eyes water. Usually, the second-in-command protocol was applied only when the commanding officer went mad during a mission, forcing his subordinates to replace him. The protocol implied that whatever went wrong with the mission would be his fault, whereas every success would be to Floria's merit. It left no space for politics or power plays. Even if Floria willingly killed everyone, it would still be his fault. With all due respect, General, I wasn't done with my report. Permission to speak freely, sir. Floria said. Granted. Varian nodded for her to continue. Something doesn't add up. The undead clearly knew the caves well enough to stage an ambush, so we can assume that ghouls mined the crystal veins undetected until recently. Yet this raises some questions, the answers to which may prove vital for the success of the mission. If this really is a crystal mine, then how could Belen of Famar find red raw gemstones? Ghouls would never be so sloppy. Quite the contrary. Their presence shows carefully planning and preparation. I considered this to be a setup, but putting a crystal mine at stake just to kill random soldiers makes no sense. Back when they left the scraps, the undead had no idea who would have found the gems or who would be sent here, so it can't be all part of a bigger scheme. Last but not least, why didn't they detonate the mines after we defeated them? It takes but one ghoul and one spell to turn this place into a huge crater, yet the mines are still here for us to take. Floria looked with worry at Freya, who was talking with the members of the Crystal Shield Guild that had finally returned. I'm glad to see there's someone capable of using her brain. Varian drummed his fingers on the black mahogany desk, asking himself the same questions, yet finding no plausible answer. Requesting permission to join the conversation, Your Honor, Freya said while raising her hand. This is no classroom, and I'm no judge, Mage Ernest. Permission granted anyway. Varian chuckled. My men brought good and bad news. The good news is that following my sister, Captain Ernest's instructions, they found several hidden caves filled with prisoners. Their code name is Life Banks, for short. Varian cut her short. Several life banks. My men were taking care of the survivors and collected some information. Based on what the prisoners said, the life banks were there for a while, and before the oldest prisoner got turned into lesser undead, they talked about a mine. Freya said, Excellent job, both of you. Varian's smile was sincere now. Captain Ernest, your cunning allowed us to confirm the presence of a crystal mine and to cut off the enemy's supplies. Mage Ernest, if not for your guild, the incompetence of the previous commanding officer might have been fatal. It was you who ordered the barrier array to be strengthened and then sent them to empty the life banks, securing our victory. What about the bad news? There were also beasts in the blood banks, which means that today we didn't fight the main force. I suspect they were just probing our defenses. Freya said, Don't worry, they will find you ready. I've been updating your reinforcements the whole time. They will come in force and prepared. Rest until their arrival, and then focus on finding the crystal veins. Varian said. Floria had nothing more to say, so she put Tlee through and went with Freya to help the wounded. All soldiers capable of using magic knew at least Tier 2 healing spells and first aid, yet there was a lot to do. Quilla was working hard on those in critical condition and was already sweating bullets. Small injuries required but a spell to be healed, whereas life-threatening injuries required either the healer to share their vitality or blood transfusions and complicated surgical procedures. Tier 4 light magic was something only a specialized mage could use, which made every single healer a priceless asset. You've done enough, sis. Floria delicately pushed Quilla away, taking her place. Freya silently thanked Floria for doing what she couldn't. Using so many dimensional spells had taken a toll on Freya, and she couldn't heal so much as a scratch without fainting. She was soldiering on to keep the morale high and an eye on Quilla. "You are safe now. Just eat and rest," Floria said to a soldier whose liver and stomach had been ruptured by ice spikes. He had been deathly pale until a second ago, but after the healing magic had mended his holes-ridden abdomen, color had returned to his face. He managed to say thank you before falling asleep. "Well done. You just need to learn Tier 5 to become a full-fledged healer." Quilla was pale as well. She was happy to share both the forge mastering lesson and the healing specialization with her sisters, yet Quilla felt envious because she was incapable of fighting. "Let's move to our next patient." Quilla needed help even to stand up. "I don't think so." Freya stopped Quilla in her tracks. "We're both dead tired. We need to rest instead of making the patient list longer." "You don't understand, What's on your forehead?" Floria cut her short and poked Quilla's head while activating a Tier 1 healing spell. It healed her bruises and made her fall asleep. "I love you," Freya said with so much sincerity that many turned their heads. In a non-sexual way. The bystanders lost interest in the scene and returned to their activities. "Perverts," Freya said while covering Quilla with a blanket and putting a pillow under her head. "Thanks again. I would have done it myself, but I've got no strength left but to talk for a few minutes." Quilla needs help. She almost endangered her life earlier. One of the first things they taught us at the Academy along with Tier 4 magic was to recognize our own limits. A dead healer means hundreds of lost lives that could have been saved if the mage just took a break. I noticed that something was wrong with her since we started spending more time together. Floria moved Quilla to their private tent so that no one would disturb her sleep or the ongoing conversation. She acts awkwardly whenever we are alone, has trouble speaking her mind even in your presence, but the worst thing is that she seems to have emotionally regressed to right after Qulla's events. She has never been scared of caves, nor been so reckless, while healing strangers outside the heat of the battle. Being a dedicated healer is one thing. Acting as if the weight of Mogre rests on your shoulder is another. Agreed. We need to talk to her before it's too late. Freya nodded. Chapter 10-12 Change of Leadership Part 2. By the way, you are quite energetic for someone who slaughtered an army of lesser undead by herself just to slay some ghouls, and then heal people without ever taking a break. Freya said. I'm surprised as well. Floria had no idea the time of her awakening neared. I'll go heal as many people as I can before going to sleep. We're done exploring the caves for today, that's for sure. Between taking care of the wounded, repairing the camp's defenses, and treating the people rescued from the life banks, everyone remained on edge until a few hours later, when the reinforcements arrived. A single mage warped outside the barrier and assembled a temporary warp gate. It allowed to instantly move the troops from the nearest base to destination and bring the victims of the undead where they could receive all the assistance they needed without compromising the safety of the mission. The army really doesn't spare expenses when crystal veins are involved. Freya yawned while looking at the newcomers. Even though she had taken a tonic before going to sleep, her body still suffered from the strain of the previous day. Freya had a light headache due to mana abuse, and her muscles were sore from the aftereffects of top-grade body-enhancing potions. Feeling her limbs too stiff to be useful in battle, Freya made a mistake, performing stretching exercises in the open. Her skinwalker armor was still in its combat mode, resembling a tight suit of armor instead of her usual baggy clothes. The sight of her luscious curves as she wiggled her whole body, the light dancing in her raven black hair framing her features, and her bosom giggling at her every move made a lot of soldiers fall into a stupor. Some tripped on their own feet. The reinforcements fell onto each other in a comical domino effect, and the healers poured the potions on their patients' heads instead of that in their open mouths. Nice to meet you, sweet fairy. I'm Sergeant Svarzan Rosix of the Rosix household, a young man in his early 20s said, offering her the flowers that he was supposed to put on the bodies of the deceased. Svarzan was a bit taller than Freya, about 1.68, 5 feet 6 inches, with dark blonde hair and gray eyes. He was half panting and half speaking because he had rushed to her before someone else could make his move first. I'm still new in the army, but my family has enough influence to allow you safe passage back to Famar, and I'm skilled enough to protect you in the case you decided to stay. The battlefield is not a place for such a lovely lady like you, and I'm willing to put my life at risk just to be worthy of your smile. Svarzen's words might have been considered romantic in a bard's tale, but in real life, they were beyond offensive. Freya had spent her whole life training in both magic and swordplay, graduating from one of the 6 great academies and ranking 2nd overall. Yet the man in front of her assumed she was just a soldier, failing to notice anything about her but her appearance. Ignoring her armor, sword, and the tent she stood in front of was already rude. Treating her as a damsel in distress waiting for a hero just added oil to the fire. Nice to meet you. I'm Mage Freya Ernas, of the Ernas household, guild master of the Crystal Shield Guild. Her voice was stone cold, and her words made the hapless youth freeze like a deer in the lights. The rest of the camp was laughing their ass off at his expenses. Even those who thought she was just a pretty face at first still respected her status as both an Ernas and a mage. After seeing her fight, soldiers and prospectors had understood, while the members of the Crystal Shield Guild referred to her as God whenever they thought to not be overheard. Now, unless you wish me dead, bring those purple plumes to the fallen, and don't talk to me again unless it's about the mission, she snarled, going back inside the tent to shapeshift her clothes into something more comfortable. The flowers he was holding resembled a bellflower, each petal of which had a black eye-looking spot that made them look like phoenix's plumes. Laying one on a dead body was supposed to help and protect the deceased on their way to the netherworld, keeping them from turning into undead due to unsolved grievances. According to the lore, it would also grant the fallen the possibility to be reincarnated if they wished for it. It's more than that. Floria closed the tent behind her sister while glaring at Svarzen. This isn't just about the mines, but about stopping the undead from achieving whatever they were doing here. As much as I hate to admit it, the kingdom is at war. By the time Quilla woke up, the security of the camp had been reinforced threefold, the wounded had been treated, and the dead brought back to their families. The original members of the expedition were tense, yet in high spirit. After seeing the Ernas fight, and with so many elite soldiers joining their ranks, they were certain that the mission would be a huge success. At the same time, however, the mood among the reinforcements was sour at best. Between Svarzen being publicly humiliated in front of his comrades and the rumors that Cordis had spread about the methods Floria had employed to wrestle the command of the mission from him, half of the camp glared at the Ernas in spite. Hiding precious information to look good in front of the general was really a cheap blow. Many said, even if you don't agree with a fellow soldier, sucker punch him to make him miss the action and hog all the glory is too much. Floria Ernas is a disgrace for the army. Others would reply, they are such powerful mages. All of them are healers, and yet over 10 people died. I think they didn't save everyone on purpose to suck up on Barian and make Captain Cordis look bad. All nobles only think about themselves and don't care for us commoners. The reinforcements' rude comments caused fights to break out the moment the members of the Crystal Shield Guild or those who had survived only thanks to the Ernas heard them. Before dinner, even the new healers had run out of mana to treat all the injuries caused by the infighting, and half of the camp was in detention. Quilla refused to eat and remained in her tent, forcing her sisters to act sooner than they had planned. You're still pale and need to eat, Freya said. Seriously, what's wrong with you? It's not the first time I put a drone in his place, and you know as well as I do that. Outside noble courts, the Erna's name brings more trouble than respect. Yeah. Also, what's with being scared of the dark and trying to act like a martyr at all times? We have nothing to prove to those people. I care about your life much more than I care about theirs, Floria said. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. You have done so much for me, yet all I ever brought you was trouble. Quilla started to sob. Not only she considered every dead soldier as her personal failure, but also seeing her sisters treated so unfairly was more than her broken spirit could take. Chapter 10-13 Elephant in the Room Part 1. How is any of this your fault? Freya hugged her, soon joined by Floria, who caressed Quilla's head and tried to calm her down enough to make sense. You didn't call the undead here, nor did you tell those idiots to ogle at me as if I'm just a piece of meat. Everything is my fault, Quilla replied. I accepted that stupid ring back at the academy because I was jealous of Foria and Lith. I killed Uriel, and Mom almost died because I was too weak to fight the slave item. That day, I put you in front of an impossible decision that years later has ruined your career. If when I came to your house for the first time I refused being adopted, now you would be happy and I would have received the punishment I deserve. Mom should have given up on me and saved you from Dyrus. Both at the academy and at Kulla, I failed to save anyone. I'm just a useless orphan. If it wasn't for me, you and Freya would be treated as the heroes you are. I don't deserve to be your sister. Quilla wailed in desperation, trying and failing to escape from the embrace of which she felt unworthy. And here I thought that Cordis was the biggest idiot in the camp. Floria said, "You did nothing wrong. Quite the contrary, both here and at Kulla, you saved lots of lives, mine and Litha's included. Back at the academy, you had no idea your wannabe boyfriend had given you a slave ring. You were just one of the dozens of students that crazy bitch of Nalier turned into her puppets. What happened wasn't your fault, but hers. Uriel was one of her main targets, just like Linjos. You attacked him only because Nalier ordered you to, and Dyrus knows it. His son, our friend, died in the attempt to prevent the outbreak of a civil war, and with his actions, Dyrus is spitting on Uriel's sacrifice." Floria is right, Freya said. "We all have read the diaries Uriel has left, and we know how he felt about us. He wouldn't want you to blame yourself for what happened. As for Kulla, you were the true hero there. If you didn't stop the mana reactor, everyone would be dead now. We don't share any blood, but you are my sister since the day we met. I'd rather die than give up on you." Freya lulled the sobbing Quilla in her arms, wishing that Journey was really behind Balkier's return and that their mother would make all those responsible for her sister's suffering pay tenfold for their actions. Thousands of kilometers away, Journey felt her ears burn and added a few lines to her master plan. "Quilla, life will always be unfair. Giving up on my job hurts, but it could go much worse." Floria said, "I still have my magic, my family, and my whole life in front of me. You don't have to feel bad for something that even Mom and Dad couldn't stop. Now, since we are sharing everything, tell me the truth. Why did you break up with Anathor right after we entered Kulla?" "He gifted me a ring," Quilla replied. "That's a wrong move if I ever heard one." Freya said, "It wasn't his fault. I never told him anything about my days at the academy because it was too painful. When he gave me the ring, I couldn't force myself to wear it or give him an explanation. After that, we just drifted apart until it was too late." Quilla had stopped crying, but Floria refused to let go of her. "Unhand me, or I'll blow my nose on your sleeve. Be my guest. All skinwalker armor are self-cleaning, little one." Floria kissed Quilla's head and gave her a handkerchief. "You know, back at the academy, I was always envious of your figure, Freya. Now, instead, I'm relieved I'm not the one forced to dress like a sack of potatoes to not be bothered every time I step outside the house." Quilla still sniffled, but between the embrace and finally finding the strength to express her fears out loud, she realized how nonsensical they were. She still felt guilty, but Moger had stopped resting on her shoulders. "How nice of you," Freya chuckled while ruffling Quilla's hair. After the gloomy mood in the tent was gone, the three young women dined together, talking about all the good times they had shared during their time at the White Griffin until they fell asleep. The following day, the prospectors had joined hands with the army mages to create a first line of fortifications around the camp. The barrier that the Crystal Shield Guild had erected during the first day was now several times bigger and stronger. "What are your orders for today, sir?" Captain Cordis had been forced to stay up all night to make sure that everything went according to Floria's plan. He didn't know whether to hate more the fact that she had managed to anticipate the moves of the undead or that he couldn't find a single flaw in her countermeasure plan. "Same as yesterday. We need to find the crystal veins, if there are any, and understand what the undead were doing here. Maybe there are no mines, and we stumbled into one of their secret bases. It would not make the kingdom richer, but it could deal a huge blow to their plans." Split the soldiers in 3 teams. One composed of elite units and prospectors to search the mines, another of scouts to find all traces the undead might have left, and a third to keep watch. We can't fall twice for the same trick. If the ghouls return, we have to regroup quickly and strike as one. Floria said, "Captain Cordis, I'll leave you in charge of the camp while I explore the caves. If anything happens, call me and I'll warp here. Are we clear?" "Sir, yes, sir." Cordis almost bit his tongue to keep the edge out of his voice. How dare she treat me like a strawman even though we hold the same rank? Ernest is basically saying she doesn't trust me to do anything but keep watch. I don't know how, but I'll make her pay. He thought. Svarzin was walking around the Ernest's tent, trying to find a way to make up for his blunder. The problem was that each speech he rehearsed sounded worse than the last. What are you doing here? Freya was wearing an ample, deep red mage robe that covered from sight anything but her hands, head, and feet. I thought I made myself clear yesterday, so unless invisible enemies are surrounding us, we've got nothing to talk about. Look, I know I've acted like an idiot yesterday. Well, at least we agree on something. She cut him short and tried to leave, but he stepped in front of her with his hands raised in a plea for a minute of her time. And I know this is sudden, but I'm in love with you. All I'm asking you is to give me a chance. One single date. After that, if you're not interested, you'll never hear from me again, Svarzin said. Chapter 1014 Elephant in the Room Part 2. I like your guts, and I would have given you a chance if you skipped the bullshit about love. You don't know the first thing about me. The only thing you are infatuated with is my appearance. Love is too strong a word to be abused like that. Only a shallow person that knows nothing about their own feelings can use it so freely with someone they have just met. I've been asked out by a lot of men like you. You all think yourself unique, but aside from your face, you're all the same. Goodbye. Freya walked around him, and this time the youth didn't stop her. Svarzin felt even more idiotic than the day before, wondering if his brain and mouth had actually been disconnected by some unknown illness. Would you have really gone out with him? Quilla had to walk briskly to keep up with Freya. Yes. If you don't date, you can't find anyone. He had the guts to face me again and admit his mistakes, which is rare considering that most men think themselves a godsend that I must welcome with joy. Yet that cheesy part was a deal-breaker. Quilla, what would you think if a random stranger claimed to love you at first sight? Freya asked. I would either think he's after my money or he thinks I'm an easy woman. Quilla replied, suddenly finding Svarzin's confession more tasteless than romantic. Then we are on the same page. Freya nodded to Quilla before turning to Floria. What do you want us to do today, Commander? Captain, not Commander. Floria rolled her eyes at her sister's ignorance about military hierarchy. The prospectors will search for crystals, but examining things properly will take too long, and in battle knowledge is power. The three of us will explore the underground network of caves and search traces of undead activities that might not be strictly related to gemstone veins. Quilla, your mana perception succeeded where even arrays failed. You'll be our guide. Freya, between your mage knight and dimensional mage specializations, you can fight or summon reinforcements according to the circumstances. You take the rear. I'm just tall, mean, and strong. My role will be to protect Quilla and buy you time in the case something goes wrong. Just the three of us? Freya asked. Yes. We might be dealing with ODI ruins, and I don't want to babysit anyone. Quilla can read their language. The gods only know why. Lith needed help for a thing. Quilla said, but Floria continued, uncaring for the explanation. I know how to find their runes, and the three of us are used to fight together. Our teamwork will allow us to move fast, and don't worry about dead weight. Any special order I should give to my men in the case Captain Dumbass tries something funny? Freya said. Actually, yes. Floria was amazed by her own naivety. She had spent so much time in the army to consider orders as absolute decrees no one would dare to defy. Her recent missions, however, had taught her better, and the mercenaries were the perfect solution to her problem. Have them keep an eye on both Cordis and the captain who led the reinforcements here, Lotta. Have your men take short turns so their marks don't notice being observed, and have them report anything unusual. We can trust no one. Floria said. Give the crystal shield some credit. We know how to tail someone. Freya sighed. She instructed her men, making it clear that they should not share any intel with the army unless it was vital for the success of the mission. It will be done. Wyra, one of Freya's seconds in command, gave her a bow so deep that she almost kneeled. Freya didn't like being worshipped by her guild members, but at least it guaranteed their loyalty. On top of that, she knew that being the strongest sword, shield, and mage among them who also taught specializations to those she deemed worthy, made it easy for them to put her on a pedestal. Quilla guided her sisters to the passage she had found just a minute before the undead attacked the prospectors. It opened on a natural underground network that closely reminded to Floria the one Morok had led them on the way to Kulla. She used earth magic to look for hidden runes or marks in the rock, but her spells didn't find anything. Meanwhile, Quilla focused on the hostile mana, trying to find its origin. There was no spell that could guide her, forcing Quilla to rely solely on her mana perception and instinct. They ended up in a dead end more than once, forcing them to retrace their steps and pick another corridor. Freya and the others knew the arrays necessary to search for crystals and might have used earth magic to open a passage, but they had no idea how to alter the walls without the risk of causing a cave-in. It was the reason why prospectors were vital during an underground exploration and why Lith needed Naurin to cheat his way to any kind of underground treasure. I really envy you too, Floria said during a short break for lunch. We have both been to Kulla, yet my mana perception isn't as good as yours, Quilla. I can feel we're getting closer to the hostile mana's source only when it becomes so much stronger that it's impossible to miss. As for you, Freya, your dimensional awareness is outstanding. Not even the members of the Queen's Corps I worked with were capable of using warps the way you do. I feel the same. I always considered Lith and Quilla our Manohar. Together they have his same amount of genius and madness. You and Uriel were our Marth. You are strong, talented, and determined to the point that you know exactly what you want and how to get it. Which leaves me the role of Vaster. Freya sighed. The one people turn to only when the other two are busy. Let's be real. Put me in a dimensional sealed area and my skills are no better than the average mage. Sometimes I wonder if there's really nothing more to me than a pretty face. I would kill for breasts like yours, Floria said, patting her left shoulder. Do not get me started about your ass. Quilla took care of the right shoulder. Very funny. That was the moment when you're supposed to tell me how talented I am. I'm already pissed off because Lith told you something that neither he nor you shared with me. Don't make it worse by spreading salt on my wounds. Freya's sisters froze, realizing that she knew about their little secret. While they were in Kulla, Lith had treated Quilla with invigoration, restoring both her body and mana. On top of that, she had seen him use magic without chance and turn into a wormling. Floria knew even more than Quilla, and after discussing the events of Kulla among themselves, aside from terms like awakened or accumulation, they had figured out most of Litha's abilities. Yet they didn't share any of that with Freya to respect his privacy. Floria and Quilla were certain to have been discreet, yet the elephant in the room they believed to have brilliantly hidden was actually rampaging through the house. Chapter 10-15 End of the line Part 1. Don't act that surprised. I'm not deaf nor dumb. After Kulla, you were distressed about something, yet you refused to talk about it with me and spent a lot of time with Floria. Freya said to Quilla. Not to mention all the times you two abruptly change topic the moment I get close, and after that, you have guilty looks on your faces. Quilla never had secrets for me before Kulla, so it wasn't hard to understand what happened. Lith is the only person we all know whose secrets we have kept hidden from our parents and even from each other. Lith is right when he says that we spend too much time together. Quilla sighed. You read me like a book, Freya. All you said it's true, but it's not up to me to share such things with you. Just like you didn't tell me what really happened in Xantia. You noticed? Freya was flabbergasted. She had always thought that Protector's secret was safe with her. Of course I did. By the way, the feeling of envy is mutual. People consider me a genius, yet my greatest achievement is always being the weak link in our chain. Sure, I learn quickly and my magic is powerful, but when push comes to shove, I'm either a burden or a first aid kit. You two, instead, not only are considered the best in your respective fields of work, but you can also hold your ground under any circumstance. Even in Lorule, I was the only one left behind. Morok was right. I might be young, but I'm as strong as an old fossil. At that point, the cheery mood had turned sour. Just like Quilla couldn't deny Freya's words, her sisters had no way to sugarcoat the fact that Quilla was indeed weak. Whenever they moved, their first priority was always to keep her safe. They resumed walking in silence, going deeper underground until it was time to go back to the camp for dinner. They were tired from the exploration and sad from the revelation that their bond of trust was flawed because of a certain someone. I could confront Lith about the events of Kulla, but I don't want to force him to open up. He already has deep-rooted trust issues, and I don't want to ruin our friendship. I swear that if even Camilla knows what the heck is going on, I'm the last to know. I'm going to kick his ass. Freya thought, while opening a dimensional door back to their tent. Floria listened to her subordinates' reports, and Freya did the same. While she waited for their return, Quilla prepared dinner. I really like cooking. It's very similar to magic in its need for attention to the details and mixing the various ingredients while keeping them balanced. She thought. The soldiers had nothing to report, while the prospectors were fairly optimistic. They had yet to find anything, but very rarely crystal veins ran so close to the surface, and even if they did, it was likely that the undead had cleared them first to fool passers-by. The members of the Crystal Shield, however, didn't bear good news. They had seen the two captains use their personal amulets too often for it to be normal. On top of that, both Cordis and Lotta spent most of their time inside their respective tents, where Freya's men couldn't follow them. Floria shared all the information with Barian. The general wasn't pleased about fellow members of the army being put under surveillance, but he couldn't dismiss her worries nonetheless. I'll have their backgrounds checked again and extend the investigation to their families as well. Barian said, "This is not just about external enemies, sir." Floria said, "We both know that Velandyrus has many allies. Any accident that happens here could be easily pinned to the undead. After what happened to the Nuragor household, he needs a win to tip the scale again. That's why I didn't want to come here. I know, yet I wouldn't have recalled you if I had another choice." Yet Barian was only telling a half-truth. The army was indeed understaffed, but he had chosen her because the mission seemed foolproof and crystal veins would look great on her resume. Her brilliant response to the undead's attack had made the situation even better. Finding a crystal mine was already quite a feat, but snatching one from the public enemy number one was exactly the kind of achievement that could put Floria's career back on track. Keep me posted and don't hesitate to come directly to me in case you need backup. General Barian out. Upon returning to their tent, Freya and Floria found Quilla talking with Tleorman. The chief royal prospector was giving her best pitch to make Quilla switch careers. "Don't worry about a race. I can teach you myself, and with your talent, I doubt it will take long to bring you up to speed." Tle said. After she was done, Quilla promised she would think about it, and gave everyone a plate of beef stew with vegetables. The hot broth took off their bones the chill that spending the day inside the dark and damp caves had left, while also keeping warm the other ingredients. "Delicious. If I wasn't already married, I would propose to you. You are a great healer, prospector, and now even cook. Is there even something you're not good at?" Tle cleaned her plate and asked for seconds. "Fighting." Quilla sighed. "Welcome to the club. You can be a junior member at best." Tle replied. "At least yesterday you contributed, whereas most members of my unit just wet themselves and cried for their moms, me included." "Seriously?" Freya blurted out, realizing how rude her question was the moment it came out of her mouth. "Yep." Tle nodded without a shred of shame. "You'll find no hero among royal prospectors. Don't get me wrong, we got plenty of nice people with a good heart. It's just that when danger appears, bathroom calls. We are braver than those mages who spend their whole lives cooped up in their labs or courts, but we are no warrior material. On the other hand, our mortality rate is the lowest in the army and our life expectancy is the longest." After a bit of chit-chat exchanging tricks about how to spot crystals that would serve the Urnas during their exploration, and after all the three of them had silently agreed, Floria asked, "Tle, have you ever worked before with either Captain Cordis or Lotta?" "I've been in this business long enough to know almost everyone." Tle replied, "Forgive my rudeness, but I don't like talking behind the back of my colleagues, and I doubt you're asking because you fancy them. I don't want to dig up dirt on them. I just want to know if I can rely on them. There's only so much their personal files can tell me, and you don't ask the barkeep if their beer is good." Floria said. Point taken. Tle thought for a while, pondering how close she had come to death due to Cordis's incompetence, and if she could afford to entrust her life to Lotta. Cordis is as stubborn as a mule, but less smart. He never got past captain despite being active on the field because he got as many losses as victories. Chapter 1016 End of the Line Part 2. He's the to-go guy when you want things done by the book, but he lacks both foresight and flexibility. He was too good to remain a lieutenant, but not good enough to make a decent captain. Lotta, instead, is a smart and competent woman, but too ambitious for her own good. You never know if she's serving the army, her political allies' interests, or her own. If I had to make an educated guess, I'd say that probably Barian chose Cordis to make you look good, while his enemies exploited the crisis to put Lada in charge of the reinforcements before one of Barion's people was available. Flea said, "That's one heck of analysis for someone who just a second ago claimed to don't like to talk behind the back of her colleagues." Freya was glad to not have joined the army. The more she learned about it, the less she liked the power plays hidden behind even the smallest decision. Floria rolled her eyes, glad that Freya was just a consultant. Her brash attitude, coupled with her habit to speak to anyone as if they were her peers, disregarding both age and rank, would have made her career so short that she would become a cautionary tale in the army. Indeed it is. Flea laughed. For a moment I had forgotten that in my line of work, there is no place for politeness. To survive as long as I did, you must learn to distinguish with a glance if a vein is worth your time or not, and people are no different. You're my crystal veins, girls. Don't let me down. The chief prospector yawned and wished them good night before going to her tent. Casting arrays all day was a tiring business, and age only moved forward. Is it me, or does Flea resemble Yandra a bit? Floria asked once they were alone. Yeah. Quilla remembered with nostalgia the late professor of the Black Griffin who had clashed with Lith on their first meeting, just to later offer her magical legacy and her professorship to him. Nope. Age aside, they have nothing in common. Freya had never met Yandra, but she considered herself a good judge of character. Based on what you told about how she lived and died, Yandra was passionate, whereas Flea is calculative. She didn't ask us for protecting her unit or her disciple, only her own ass. What a Lith-like thing to say. Quilla gasped at her sister's cynical analysis. Yet Freya is not completely wrong. Floria thought back at all Tlee's words and actions. I'm not as cynical as you two, but if there's something I learned from Kulua's aftermath, is that believing in blind loyalty is for fools. Under all the pretty words about honor and the oaths we took, under our uniforms, the military are still humans. Let's take Tlee's words with a grain of salt, and from tomorrow onwards, let's put a tail on her as well. Freya nodded and prepared their beds. The following day promised to be interesting as well. Thanks to Freya's custom amulet, they could resume their search exactly from the same spot they had left a few hours prior. Between the words they had shared among themselves, and with Tlee, the Ernest sisters had a lot to think about. They proceeded in silence, only interrupted by the status reports Freya and Floria regularly received from their respective subordinates. Moving in the tunnels gave them an eerie feeling. There was only magic to light their way. All the tunnels looked the same, giving them the impression of going round in circles, and every one of their steps produced an echo. It made them feel vulnerable, and fighting the urge to not keep spells at the ready made them often lose focus. Casting arrays while keeping their guard already drained a lot of energy. Keeping powerful spells at their fingertips would make their exploration last minutes instead of hours. Unlike Awakened, fake mages would consume mana the moment they cast a spell, no matter if they used it or saved it for later. People like Lith, instead, could cast and later release unused spells, expending solely the mental focus necessary to keep them at the ready. The Ornis sisters were forced to fight the paranoia and claustrophobia that walking for hours in the dark inspired, so when they saw a light ahead of them, they didn't rejoice. They turned off their own light and weaved their best spells as fast as they could. Floria's Reaver was the perfect tool for an ambush, while Freya's Rapier, Dreadnought, was more a jack of all trades. They slowly moved forward, using darkness magic to conceal their smell and air magic to float above the ground, while creating the sound of their steps to give the impression that they had never slowed down. The spell moved faster than them, so that they would ambush anyone who attacked the source of the noise. Yet when the spell reached the illuminated area, nothing happened. They didn't lower their guard, and Freya conjured a dimensional fissure the size of a keyhole in front of her eye and its exit point in front of the source of light, using them as an improvised surveillance device. By the Great Mother, she whispered while passing the fissure to her sisters and allowing them to look through it as well. The dark cave led to a crystal vein where the lowest-tier gemstones were green-colored, something that would put to shame even the minds of Lyroxia. By rotating the exit point of the fissure, Freya had searched the place for enemies, only to find blue and violet crystals bigger than an apple protruding from the walls. Only after conjuring a hush zone did Floria speak. Things couldn't get any worse. We just stumbled into the closest thing to a death trap I've ever seen. The crystal vein means that we can't warp away, only blink. Yet in such a poorly lit and unfamiliar place, even that is pointless. If we step through that cave, we'll not be allowed to use big spells without risking to blow everything up. If I were an undead, I'd choose this place to ambush us since it would allow me to exploit my superior physical prowess and endless stamina. We need to get far away enough to safely open a warp steps and call for reinforcements. Floria's analysis was so accurate that if the ghoul in charge of the ambush could have heard her, she would have thought Floria to be a psychic. Unfortunately for the Erna's sisters, their trick with the sound of footsteps had fooled and alerted their enemies at the same time. Not seeing them appear had halted the attack of the ghouls, who soon started to wonder what was going on. The hush zone kept them from overhearing Floria, but the noise that the spell produced also made the ghouls understand that somehow their plan had failed and that they had to move before it was too late. They came out of the cave walls, surrounding the humans from every side. This time they wore enchanted protections and wielded short weapons that would amplify their attack prowess without being hindered by the confined space. Freya, take Quilla and run. Floria feared that without dimensional magic, Freya would be no different from Quilla. Floria was already outnumbered and outmatched, making the situation a losing fight before it even started. If she also had to protect someone, her chance of victory would go from little to none. Chapter 1017 Orion's Wrath Part 1. Escape? That's easier said than done. Freya understood her sister's worries, but the only way out was blocked by two undead. The silver lining in their predicament was that the Erna's sisters had finished preparing their spells and had their weapons already in hand. The ambush had succeeded, but the girls' preparation had neutralized its element of surprise. Each one of the Ernas conjured a full guard spell, reducing the advantage that superior numbers granted to their enemies. The only problem was that after finishing to weave the spells, they had no time to drink any potion. Without the aid of the alchemical tool, the gap in physical prowess was their greatest enemy. The ghouls smelled the intoxicating fear coming from their prey and established the pecking order. The little girl was the weakest link, almost on the verge of panic. The hot girl was scared as well, but her determination was stronger than her fear. The slender, effeminate man, instead, wasn't afraid for himself so much as for the two women. Where the heck is Captain Ernest? The leader of the ghouls asked Floria, igniting her rage. She hated to be mistaken for a man just because of her pixie cut. She was supposed to be with her sisters. Tell us where to find the captain, and we'll make sure you are unconscious while we feast on your flesh. Karis Lessar the ghoul pointed at Freya, calling dibs on her. Undeath made so that none of the ghouls was bad-looking. Their bodies were toned like those of athletes, without a shred of body fat or imperfections of the skin. Yet none of them could compare to the human girl, and that royally pissed them off. The fact that the women's fear had suddenly disappeared and was now replaced by hilarity only worsened the ghoul's mood. This is no laughing matter, children, Karis snarled. Rage fueled the red light of undeath in her eyes, making it so bright that the corridors seemed to be drenched in blood. If we can't get her, then we'll keep you as hostages. Alive is very different from well, and being devoured is no pleasant experience. Talk now, or my deal is off. Fuck you. That's where she is. Floria kept her voice low to not be recognized, and stepped forward. She hoped the ghouls would surround her, leaving only the two undead in front of Freya to deal with her sisters. Despite the gap in physical prowess, with their equipment, Freya and Quilla had a chance in a 2 versus 2 fight. The ghouls followed Floria's script, believing that despite his bravado, the effeminate man would regret leaving his back exposed while surrounded by so many enemies. Floria let the first enemy come in contact with her conjured stone shield before activating her personal spell, Dread Blast. It generated a small sphere comprised of air and darkness that affected everything in her surroundings except for the space within a meter, 3.3 feet, from her body. By mixing Tier 0 gravity magic with it, the spell also lowered the weight of all those in its area of effect, sending them flying like leaves. Darkness magic injured her opponents while gravity magic robbed them of their foothold. Slamming against the wall would deal no damage to an undead, but the move had temporarily broken the encirclement. Only then did Floria advance further to take out the enemy leader in the hope that it would make the rest of her forces retreat. Karis inwardly applauded the effort and went for the kill. No matter how well trained they were, humans could never compare with the experience of centuries and the perfect coordination that only a body whose strength didn't depend on muscles could accomplish. The moment Karis entered the range of full guard, Floria stopped holding back. The speed of her pseudo-awakened body took the ghoul by surprise, and the years spent practicing the same moves over and over did the rest. The lunge was a basic attack, with no trick nor feint behind it. Yet Floria executed it with a speed and accuracy beyond human, without any wasted movement nor hesitation. She knew that there was no feint she could try that the ghoul didn't counter at least 100 times in the past. Floria didn't have an undead's reflexes, so she was bound to lose if things dragged on. The simplest move was the most lethal she could perform because her opponent would overthink. Karis could see the Estoc move and tried to read Floria's muscles to determine her real goal. Attacking where a human heart was supposed to be was such a dumb strategy that the ghoul refused to believe it. By the time Karis realized it was really an attack instead of a feint, it was too late. Reaver pierced through her chest, causing nothing more than an annoying sting. Like all ghouls, Karis could freely move her weak point around her body. With a ghoul's innate regenerative properties, the cut would heal the moment the sword was pulled out of the wound. Unfortunately for her, it would never happen. Reaver was engulfed in the golden aura typical of the anti-undead weapons developed by the bulkier department. Karis suddenly felt weak. The golden aura was robbing her blood core of its strength and taking away all the gifts that undeath had bestowed upon her. Orion had never been a meek man, but after Kulua's events, he was considered the embodiment of wrath. He had poured all of his rage into war, to make Lith into the blade that would strike at their common enemies, while he had devised the weapons of his children to protect them from any harm. Using a few state secrets for personal gain was a little price to pay to make sure his daughters would come back home safe and sound. Karis tried to plunge into the ground, but the rock was deaf to her call. She tried to move her heart from the stomach to the calf, away from the Estoc, but her weak point remained still, and even her wound bled as if she was still alive. What the fuck? Fuck you. That's how. Floria used her personal Tier 5 spell, Master Sword, to unleash the darkness spells stored inside her ring directly inside the ghoul's body. Master Sword was a Tier 5 Mage Knight spell that allowed her to channel her magic inside her Estoc and release it at will upon contact. Mage Knights had to often fight in close combat while defending their mark, so Floria had devised Master Sword to be able to use all kinds of spells without having to worry about their area of effect or speed. Darkness magic was the bane of the undead. It made Karis's chest rot, and with it her heart, reducing the conceited ghoul into ashes before her companions, struck by dread blast, could even hit the ground. That was the easy part, but now that they know how fast I am, the same trick will not work again. Floria thought, while stepping back to regroup with her sisters. Freya had no idea what had just happened, but she took the shocked expression on the faces of the ghouls in front of her as her cue. Dreadnought, her rapier, had been enhanced as well with the anti-undead properties and its abilities further upgraded. Chapter 10:18 Orion's Wrath Part 2. Orion had enchanted the rapier so that it could emit all the 6 elements, even light, so as to give his daughter the greatest versatility in battle. She could even use it to heal her allies or to stab and heal her target at the same time, making it easier to capture someone alive. Freya used the light element to lit the corridor and regain part of her dimensional abilities. Unlike War, Dreadnought didn't channel and amplify its wielder magic, but it produced simple spells on its own, without them needing time to be cast nor requiring any mana from Freya. The mines were too close to use steps, but now all of them could blink. She appeared right behind the 2 undead, unleashing the Tier 4 Blood Dusk spell against one ghoul while lunging with her rapier at the other. Yet once outside the dimensional door, Freya's movements were akin to slow motion to them. Due to the confined space, she couldn't appear below them nor on the sides, making her strategy predictable. They turned around a split second after the blink, dodging the attacks with ease. The spell and the darkness-infused blade hit only air, making Freya curse her bad luck. As long as the ghouls were outside full guard's range, she could barely follow their movements. Quilla racked her brain in search of a way to help either of her sisters, But everything happened so fast that her plans would become obsolete before she could formulate them. She had practiced hard since Kulla, but 1 year was a drop in the ocean compared to the lifelong effort of her sisters and the decades of experience of the undead. Quilla was barely able to follow Freya's movements when they sparred. Floria and the ghouls looked like demigods to her eyes. Her fear grew with each passing second as she helplessly watched Floria being wounded and surrounded while the best Freya could do was blink to stall for time. She wished that her parents were there, and then that Lith was there. When both failed, she prayed the gods to give her the strength to do something, but only grunts and blood ensued. She hated herself for being so useless, and the ghouls even more for considering her so weak that they didn't hesitate to show their backs to her. The problem was that they were right. The natural resistance to the elements all undead shared, coupled with the ghouls' regenerative abilities, would make most of her spells a threat only to Freya. Darkness magic would hurt them, but it was so slow that from that distance the ghouls would dodge it easily, with the risk of Freya getting in the line of fire. Quilla remembered the day when she had killed Uriel. Back then, her body refused to obey no matter how hard she tried, whereas now she wasn't even trying. She stepped forward without even noticing, closing the distance between her and the ghouls, blocking the only escape route. Thanks to their natural affinity with darkness magic, the two undead perceived the spell Quilla had conjured before it was fully formed, while their enhanced senses allowed them to pinpoint her without even the need to turn around. When a little girl met monsters, death was the only outcome. Make another step and we'll kill you. We only need one hostage, the male ghoul said while conjuring an earth wall to block both Freya's sword and spells. She was going all out just to keep up with them, whereas the undead could focus solely on the defense and wait for the moment she was too tired to fight back. Freya's prowess was well known, and no one dared to underestimate her dimensional magic. The ghouls used earth spells to hinder her line of sight, afraid that she might turn the tables with a single spell. Quilla ignored the warning and never stopped moving. The two ghouls regretted wasting such delicious meat, but the mission was more important than their appetite. Their hands moved so fast that they were just a blur, filling the air behind them with a swarm of enchanted throwing knives coated with poison. With a little luck, one of them would hit the effeminate man as well and put an end to the fight. Quilla took another step forward. Now that the ghouls were inside her full guard's area of effect as well, she flicked her wrists and a silvery blur darted out of the ample sleeves of her assistant professor uniform. Two adamant chains deflected the throwing knives and then wrapped themselves respectively around the left arm of the male undead and the right leg of the female. The sharp hooks at their extremities dug through the protections and flesh, allowing Quilla's spells to reach their targets without fail. Orion had tried to teach her how to use a weapon, but due to the little time they had to practice together and Quilla lacking even the basics, he had failed to find a tool suited to protect her life. A shield would block, but without attack, there was no victory. Weapons required that she got close to her enemy, but with her skills, Quilla could consider herself lucky to survive 2 moves. Long-distance weapons would always be less powerful and versatile than the Tier 5 spells that she could guide with her willpower. Only after realizing there was no answer to his problem did Orion invent Bloodbind. The enchantment on the mystical chains was simple but effective. All the energy from the mana crystals that would usually be used to fuel offensive abilities allowed Bloodbind to move according to Quilla's will. Unlike her body, they weren't affected by poor hand-to-eye coordination nor lack of muscle mass. They would move as she wanted them to the moment her mind willed them to do it. On top of that, once Bloodbind grabbed their target, they were capable of transmitting Quilla's spells as if she was touching them. They were akin to another set of limbs that would put her thoughts into action. Thanks to Full Guard, Quilla could perceive all the incoming projectiles and trace the shortest path to deflect them in sequence before going on the offensive. Bloodbind was far from perfect. The farther it got from her, the weaker it would become. To make matters worse, the chains had almost no offensive power by themselves, and their defensive abilities were bound to Quilla's ingenuity. They were a last resort in the case everything went wrong and an enemy arrived too close for comfort. Exactly like it was happening down in the mines. The golden aura of Bloodbind weakened the undead, while the darkness magic they carried damaged their bodies faster than they could regenerate. The chains also restrained the ghouls' movements long enough to allow Freya to kill them. Come on, we need to run. Freya said. Do it, and he's dead. A ghoul said while holding Floria from the neck while twisting her dislocated dominant arm behind her back. Reaver lay on the floor, protected by a golden aura that made all the undead step back as if it could bite them at any moment. Her left shoulder bore a deep wound that bled profusely and her stomach another. Floria had killed most of their assailants before her body had failed her. Each injury she suffered and each spell she cast weakened her, whereas her opponents would simply learn from the mistakes of their fallen comrades until none of her tricks worked anymore. Chapter 1019 Out of Time Part 1. Try to escape, and we'll kill him first, and then it will be your turn. We got plenty of backup waiting for you ahead. Give us Floria Ernas, and maybe you will live. The ghoul said while choking his prisoner. What a load of bullshit. Floria sneered, forcing her voice through the grip that almost kept her from breathing. You don't want to kill any of us. What kind of deal do you have with Dyrus? How do you know about it? The ghoul was so flabbergasted that he blurted out the truth. Oh, please, I'm not stupid. The undead from 2 days ago attacked to kill and had allies, whereas you act alone and wasted your time talking. You clearly belong to a different group. Only Velan Dyrus would be so crazy to put everything he has at risk and mobilize a bunch of immortal worms just to get his hands on a 21-year-old woman. By the way, I'm Floria, jackass. She said. Thanks. This will make everything easier. You're right about almost everything. He didn't send us to capture you, but to kill all the three of you. A child in exchange for a child. Plus interest. The ghoul said, imitating Velan's voice. Floria cursed her naivety, wishing that the ghoul was lying about the backup so that her sisters would manage to escape. Her windpipe started to deform under the increasing pressure and her lungs burned. Objection. An annoying voice drew everyone's attention to the north corner of the tunnel while its owner blinked behind the ghoul and cut off both his arms at the same time with what looked like two one-handed sickles. I called dibs on the little one. I will not let months of hard work go to waste because of a few cannibalistic jerks. Morok Erie, ex-ranger of the Hessa region and Quilla's suitor without her knowing, didn't change much from the time they parted ways. He was a man in his mid-20s, about 1.8 meters, 5 feet 11 inches, tall, with black hair and dark brown eyes. His once unkempt hair was now finely groomed, and his stubble had grown into a goatee. Morok didn't care much for appearances, but he didn't want to look like a hobo when meeting Quilla again. According to his employer, lack of personal hygiene was a deal-breaker for most women. You again? Quilla said without knowing whether to be relieved or worried by his arrival. Did you miss me, baby? Since the ghoul's arms had turned into ashes but their owner was still alive, Morok stabbed his chest and head with the sickles, flooding them with darkness magic. Pain twisted the undead's face, and then there was nothing left to twist. Floria took a deep breath to overcome the blinding pain from her wounds and recalled Reaver to her left hand, the only arm she could still move after the ghoul had dislocated her dominant arm. The moment Morok had appeared, the ghouls had resumed their attack. There were quite a few left of them, and their seamless teamwork gave them the upper hand. Floria was half dead, Freya was running on fumes, and from such a distance Quilla was useless. One ghoul engaged Morok, keeping him busy thanks to her own dual-wielding style and her one-handed battle hammers that locked the sickles in place. Another one darted at Floria for the kill, while the others aimed at Quilla, the weakest link, and the last one called for backup. Code Red. Repeat, Code Red. The undead yelled inside his communication amulet. Between her injured arm and almost being strangled, Floria had lost her focus and with it all the spells she had at the ready. With Morok too busy to protect her, she had no chance of victory against a ghoul. I need to stall for time. I should still have enough mana to activate the Skinwalker armor a few times and use first magic. She thought as the undead circled around her so fast that her eyes saw him only as a blur. Floria spun around like a top, trying to follow the enemy movements. The ghoul used his short sword to deflect Reaver, while the other blade lunged at her brain. Floria grit her teeth, raising her right hand and releasing a volley of darkness spells. The ghoul took the hits with a confident smile and continued his attack. Her magic holding rings were long since empty, and with her body as broken as her arm, Floria was akin to a cornered mouse attempting its last bite. Or so he thought until her right hand deflected his own and the darkness spell she had conjured destroyed his heart. Unlike fake mages, a true mage could always turn first magic spells into their more powerful version. By stimulating their mana core, an awakened was capable of upgrading their spells up to tier 3 if necessity arose. The only downside was that it cost a lot of mana because low-tiered spells weren't meant to hold such prowess and needed to be stabilized. Morok had no time to lose, and dead men told no tales. He used the ghoul as a cover while he shape-shifted into his tyrannical eye form and activated the black eye on his forehead. The small pillar of darkness destroyed her head, leaving her blind and deaf long enough for Morok to kill her quickly. The ex-ranger wasn't a normal man, but the offspring of a human and an emperor beast known as Tyrannical Eye or Tyrant. When he had come of age, he had abandoned his human nature just like his own mother had abandoned him. Thanks to his father's help, it didn't take him long to learn how to shapeshift with light magic. Unlike magical beasts, however, the human appearance he took wasn't idealized, but an exact copy of the body he was born with. He shapeshifted back into his human form to not scare Quilla and blinked to the save. "How can you be so slow, child?" an annoyed voice said. It was deep and strong, echoing in the tunnels akin to a war cry, even though the voice was barely a whisper. The undead who were already in front of the two earnest sisters tried to halt their advance, but even their reflexes weren't enough. A hulking figure pushed the two humans to the side and swung his blade, cutting the undead down like grass. Even being cut in half wasn't a problem for a ghoul, unless the wound was flooded with chaos magic, of course. The remaining undead was outside the blade's reach, so the newcomer unleashed a barrage of Tier 1 chaos bullets that riddled him with holes even though he had already started to merge with the rock to escape. Only Floria witnessed the slaughter because her sisters were unable to avert their gaze from their savior. The creature was 2.74 meters, 9 foot, tall, with the head of a bull, the upper body of a bulky man, and the lower body resembled that of a bull, but capable of moving on 2 legs. The Ernest sisters had never seen before a weapon like that he wielded on his right hand. It looked like a great sword, but instead of a hilt, it had a gauntlet integrated as a handguard. The design of the pata was foreign to them as much as the purple runes and mana crystals decorating the full length of the weapon. Chapter 10:20 out of time Part 2. To make matters creepier, the creature's body kept turning from what looked like flesh and blood into living shadows, yet his eyes were pitch black instead of red. Whatever it was, the creature was neither an emperor beast nor an undead. "I'm sorry for my unsightly appearance, but I can assure you I mean you no harm. I'm still getting used to this new form of mine. My name is Nandi, and I was sent to rescue you." The pata emitted a sizzling sound that made the eldritch abomination curse. Nandi had lost control of the chaos energy coursing through his body that was now devouring his prized weapon and forcing him to take it off before it was too late. The fact that they were still alive reassured Quilla and Freya of his sincerity. They quickly thanked him and rushed to heal their sister. Floria had sustained wounds so deep that there was a pool of blood at her feet. Yet when Quilla finished chanting her diagnostic spell, it revealed that Floria's body was as fit as a fiddle. Quilla only found minor injuries that barely bled, and even Floria's vitality was higher than her own. "How did you do it? I thought you had been critically injured," Quilla asked. "I don't know," Floria replied. "One moment my body felt like it was falling apart, and the next I was full of energy again. Don't ask me how I killed that ghoul, because I have no idea." Once Quilla's arrays confirmed to her that there was no longer a threat to their lives, it was time for some answers. "What are you doing here, and what took you so long to help us?" Quilla asked Morok, who was actually hoping for an adrenaline-induced romance rather than an interrogation. "I'm not a stalker, I was just doing my job." He put his hand over his heart as if he was swearing on it. "I've tried to get in touch with you several times after Quilla, but your house staff always stopped me saying that you don't want guests." Quilla nodded for him to continue. So far, he was telling the truth. She did instruct both the academy and the Ernest staff to make sure no one outside her contact list bothered her. Then, after the blood judgment thing, your mother reached to me and offered me a job. She promised me that if I kept your sister safe, she would introduce you to me again and we would go out on a date. Morok said while pointing at Floria. She did what? Quilla would have liked to refuse the idea that her own mother had sold her to pursue an agenda. Yet it was exactly what she knew that journey would do. After retiring from the army, Morok had got his title of baron with its attached lands, lots of wealth, and responsibilities. Of course, it had taken him just a few months to get bored to death, ditch the lands and responsibilities, and get back to work as a mercenary. After reading his resume, Journey knew he was the perfect man for the job. Morok was powerful, capable to live in the wilds for prolonged periods of time on his own, and most of all, he was expendable. His life was worthless in the scheme of things, and his infatuation with her daughter made him easily exploitable. I know, I would have preferred to protect you so that we could know each other over time, but Lady Ernest was adamant in her instructions. As for me being late, do you have any idea how many of those creeps were following you? Even with Nandi's help, it took me a while to get rid of them and wait for the right moment to step in. A wrong move, and they would have killed your sister. Thank the gods, she's easily mistaken for a man, and the ghouls failed to notice they already got their prize until it was too late. Morok said, "That bears one more question. Why did you help us?" Floria clenched her stomach, feeling as if it was going to burst at any moment. "I don't mean to be ungrateful, but I recognize an abomination when I see one, and your kind isn't renewed for being friendly." "I'm not an abomination, or at least not anymore. I'm a monster abomination hybrid not so different from the man whose smell you all carry." Nandi pointed at Floria's necklace and to all Litha's gifts they wore. "A hybrid?" Freya echoed, while looking at the Tier 4 magic holding ring Lith had given her for her birthday. Unlike normal rings, it could store 2 different spells. She treasured it dearly and even kept it a secret from Orion, who otherwise would pester her for the opportunity to study it. Suddenly, the memories about their adventure in Xantia, when Lith had taken a demonic form to impersonate the All-Father, assumed a completely different meaning. Freya had seen Protector shapeshift into a hybrid form and knew that the offspring of 2 different races would be born hybrids. Normally, I wouldn't believe any bull coming from a bull, but it would explain a lot. Why Lith is so strong, why he heals so quickly, and most importantly why my sisters didn't tell me about it. She thought, "As for the reason I'm here, I'm no different from the foul-mouthed man. I helped you because I was tasked to." Nandi said, "Mom makes deals with abominations as well." The 3 women said in unison, wondering what kind of monster their mother could be to instill loyalty even into such dangerous creatures. "Gods, no. I was sent to your rescue by a common friend. She'll do the explaining since I have no idea what her reasons are. Now follow me if you want to live. You don't have much time left." The Minotaur walked toward the light-filled corridor, leaving the others behind. "What do you mean? She doesn't have much time left." Quilla examined Floria again, yet she failed to find anything wrong with her. Yet her sister's pained expression was in stark contrast with the results of her diagnostic spells. "She doesn't have long enough for an explanation. You'd better move," he replied without even turning back, emitting a moan of pleasure the moment he basked into the mana crystal's light again. Before turning into an abomination, he had been a Minotaur, the Emperor Beast evolution of a Tier, and bull-type magical beast. The Master had fused some of his bits with a tribe of ogres, giving birth to a hybrid who could commune with mana gemstones like the fallen race. "What's wrong with me?" Floria needed sheer willpower just to not scream in pain. None of the wounds or illnesses she had suffered in the past was comparable with what she was experiencing. Even Balkier's poison paled in comparison. Freya tried and failed to diagnose her as well, which made the sisters desperate. "No offense, but I don't know you and my sister needs help." Freya took her communication amulet out of her storage item, only to discover that it didn't work. Then, she got away from the crystal veins enough to cast a warp steps leading back to the surface, yet her spell failed. "I told you, you can either follow me or die. It will not be at my hand, but you'll die nonetheless. It's never polite to make your host wait," the Minotaur said. Chapter 10:21 A New Path Part 1. Thanks to the crystals, Nandi stabilized his body and quickly repaired his weapon. "Follow me, damn it. I don't want to be trapped in here forever," he thought. With no other choice left, and with Floria's condition getting worse, the Ernest followed the Minotaur through a short maze comprised of crystal veins of growing purity. Soon they were surrounded solely by violet and white gemstones. In the middle of such a treasure that would have made any mage go mad with greed, there was what looked like a hunting cabin. The small wooden house had a pitched roof, only one door, and one window on each side. A clothesline filled with small clothes of different sizes was located in front of the hut, giving the impression that a large family had somehow found their way there. Quilla and Floria recognized the oppressive aura surrounding the place as that they had perceived all the way up to the surface, yet now it seemed to be no longer hostile to them. Floria suddenly felt much better. The pain stopped haunting her, her face regained its color, and she was now able to walk without help. What's happening to me? She was half relieved and half scared witless. Come on in. After opening the door, Nandi had to stoop to enter. Floria and the others quickly followed him, discovering that what was waiting for them was even more amazing than the crystal veins. Oh gods, it's bigger on the inside. Quilla blurted out, noticing how spacious the room was. The living room they had entered was over 10 meters, 30 feet, long and 15 meters, 45 feet, wide. There was a huge cauldron over the fireplace, filled with some unknown bubbling food that smelled delicious. A huge rectangular wooden table, longer than the one they dined at during social events held at the Urna's household, had been set with enough plates and cutlery to feed a small battalion. On top of that, even though the living room itself was bigger than what the hut looked from the outside, there were several doors and corridors leading to other rooms that seemed to be even bigger. The most astonishing thing, however, was the vision of an old lady, sitting on a simple wooden chair while surrounded by over 20 children. She was reading from a book while they jotted down her every word to learn how to write. The old lady had gray hair and expressive black eyes. Her nose and ears were long, her face full of wrinkles. Age spots covered her skin, making her look weak, but her voice was melodious and kind. The children were a melting pot of all ages and races. Some were barely 4 years old, while others were nearly 10. All of them were hybrids. A girl had silver hair and the red light of undeath shining in her eyes. A boy who was barely older than Aaron had webbed hands, scales of his cheeks, and gills kept appearing and disappearing on his neck. Some had fur instead of hair on their head, others had leaves and an odd-colored skin. Even Morok was so flabbergasted that no odd remark found its way out of his mouth. You're late, Nandi. The kids finished their spelling test for a while and had to take an extra lesson while waiting for you. Baba Yaga, the first awakened to have ever achieved the white core of immortality, closed the book, but the children kept writing. You know about my condition. I couldn't risk killing your guests in case I lost control of a spell or in a fit of madness. He replied, What's madness and how do you spell it? A beautiful black-haired boy asked. No one would have thought he was a hybrid if not for his right hand having no flesh nor blood, yet still capable to move normally. I'll tell you when you grow up. Dictate is over. Go wash your hands and faces. Dinner is almost ready. Baba Yaga stood up, and the class quickly dispersed after collecting their things. The moment the last child left the living room, all the doors closed on their own, sealing the room. Teach to the children the wrong word, and I'll kill you. This is your final warning. Her eyes lost all warmth and became stone cold. The old lady had a hunched back and was barely 1.45 meters, 4 feet 9 inches, tall, yet the Minotaur was cowering in fear. She emitted an overbearing aura that covered everyone in a cold sweat, as the room seemed to plunge in darkness despite being perfectly lit. The same stands for you lot. Behave in front of the children or pay the consequences. Now come closer. We have many things to talk about and little time left. Baba Yaga tapped her foot, and 5 wooden chairs popped into existence. Who are you? Freya asked. What do you want from me? Floria was somehow sure that the creepy lady had something to do with her condition. Are some of those children really half undead? Does it mean that undead can have children? Quilla's brain had stopped working for a while, but the implications of such a discovery snapped her out of it. I don't really like the other 2 Urnas, but are we really all going to die in a while? If so, I could at least cross off a foursome from my bucket list. Morok had his priorities straight. If he had to go, he might as well go out with a blast. I've done what you asked. Give me my reward so that I can finally leave this prison and live. Nandi said. Here I thought I would deal with grown-ups for once. Speak one at a time, or do not speak at all. As for your questions, you can call me Nana, Freya. I want to speak with you, Floria. Yes, to both questions, Quilla. Depends on your choices, Morok. Last but not least, you're far from completing your task, Nandi. I'll tell you when we're done. Nana sat down, and her guests were suddenly forced to do the same. Nana, Quilla politely raised her hand. Using that word after so long gave her an odd feeling. In the past, she had been familiar with another person who had made the babble word that small children used for their grandmothers as her moniker. Lady Neria, also known as Nana, had been Litha's first magic teacher. The Ernest sisters had met her more than once and had attended to her funeral. Calling someone else Nana felt weird because even though the two women looked awfully similar, they couldn't have been more different. Lady Neria had been a harsh and cynical woman, but it was just a shell to hide how broken she felt after losing everything she had worked for. She had never recovered from being rejected by the magical community after being framed for a failed mission. Baba Yaga, instead, had kind and gentle manners, yet under her soft exterior lay the strength of a true ruler. It wasn't just about her uncanny magical powers that could be perceived even when she did nothing, nor about her impossible house. The entirety of her person exuded an aura of self-confidence and authority that left people in awe even when she did something trivial like a spelling test. Chapter 1022, A New Path Part 2. Quilla was aware that the name of their host was nothing but an alias, yet she didn't pry about her identity because she was afraid of the consequences that rudeness might have. Yes, dear Quilla? Nana smiled, creeping Quilla as she wondered how could their host know her name. How can an undead have children? Aside from a few exceptions, the greater undead are still made of flesh and blood. Even though most of their organs aren't vital anymore, their bodies work just fine. Sure, their fertility is low, but it's nothing that luck and effort can't fix. Let me explain. Nana took an illustrated book called Flowers and Bees. I know how it works. Quilla blushed at the misunderstanding. I was just asking how a skeleton could have a son. Not a skeleton, a lich. At that word, the book disappeared, and with it all the warmth in the room. Those creatures are the true abominations, dear Nandi, not your kin. They get bored, get laid, and then forget about the consequences. They have no care for their offspring because they only care about themselves. They are a perversion of undeath that only births madness and pain. Together with the need to feed, liches lose their humanity. The lack of weakness makes them conceited just as the prolonged isolation drives them mad. Nana spat on the fireplace, causing it to burst into an eruption of flames and brimstone. Yet not a puff of smoke escaped the chimney nor made the room stink. The poor Roddy was almost killed the very day he was born. His mother had no idea about the father's real identity, so she attempted to murder the baby, mistaking it for a monster. Are all those children orphans? Quilla asked. Yes, they were either abandoned or their parents died trying to protect them, all because they are different. Nana said, It's very noble of you, helping the less fortunate. Freya felt sick at the idea of how much suffering each one of Nana's foster children had endured. I wonder if the same happened to Lith. Maybe that's the reason his brothers treated him so badly. It would explain why he kept so many secrets for so long. There's nothing noble in my actions. I've seen countless hybrids be born and die, yet I've never moved a finger. As you have probably guessed at this point, I'm a mage. The children are part of my most recent project, just like Nandi here. Nana said with a cold smile on her face. What do you mean? Floria clung to the armrests of her chair in frustration. At first, she had been glad to be rescued by the abomination, to be relieved of her pain. Yet now that it was gone, after Nandi had uncaringly revealed Litha's secret, after hearing all that talking about hybrids, Floria suspected to have fallen into a trap. A comfortable, cozy trap, but a trap from which she had no hope to escape nonetheless. Mogur is changing, dear Floria. What was once just a temporary anomaly like my adopted children, or the fruit of forbidden magic like the Were people, is now becoming a new race. A power of its own. Nana said, I've seen your friend, Lithverhen, vanquish my daughter who among my creations is supposed to be one of the closest to perfection. I've witnessed an insignificant mortal, the master, turn the only species that Mogur has truly abandoned into something new and powerful. She pointed at Nandi. It got me thinking, what if hybrids aren't just an accident, but a new path life is taking? What if I've been wrong all along and the solution to all my children's problems was right in front of me from the beginning? Only time and research will tell. What does this have to do with us? Why did you bring us here? Floria asked. To understand the ending, you must first listen to the beginning. Nandi, tell them your story. Nana ordered. Have you ever wondered why all living creatures can use first magic the same way, yet every race suffers from different limitations? Most humans can't use magic, and even those who can need magical words and hand signs. Animals are the same, and even when they evolve into magical beasts, they can only use a couple of elements. Plants can't use magic at all. When they acquire consciousness, they solely gain abilities linked to their affinity with earth and life. Undead share all the strengths and weaknesses of the other races because they are artificial. A failed experiment in the attempt to overcome how frail life is. Nandi looked straight at Nana, who curled her upper lip when he called her children failures. Only awakened are capable of using magic to its full potential and of unlocking the seventh element. The element of life, mana. Nandi explained to them what awakening was, along with all the gifts and risks it implied. Abominations are just failed awakened, creatures made of power and stubbornness who refuse to fade away as the natural order requires. I still don't remember how I lost my life the first time. All I know is that I was born during what you call a monster outbreak. The master had implanted bits of the original me inside a tribe of ogres to turn them into food that would enhance his strength. Yet abominations cling to life as no other race can. Somehow those bits grew into what you see now, a hybrid between ogres and the original abomination. Ogres worship mana crystals, so they took a mine as their home. It allowed me to increase my strength and stabilize my condition without having to hurt anyone. Then, when the real Nandi, or Kimbug as he called himself, came to collect his prize, I was ready. Between our shared memories and the abilities I gained from my ogre half, beating him was easy. Nandi waved his hand at a crystal that was right outside one of the open windows. A stream of energy came to him, taking the forms of all elements as the gemstone started to lose its luster and its light became duller. He pointed a finger at Quilla, sending a sliver of that energy against her skinwalker armor that lost its magical properties and shape-shifted into its original state. What the heck? She blurted out. Kimbug had no idea of the power mana crystals really hold. You and I produce mana of our own, but what about our spells or our equipment? They can't produce mana and depend on the world energy to work. Mana crystals are akin to crystallized will of Mogr, and by controlling it, one can dominate the world energy itself. After I assimilated Kimbug, I stopped feeling hungry all the time, but my strength turned out to be my weakness as well. As soon as I get further away from the crystal veins, my abomination nature starts to corrode my body. An ogre can't withstand alone the chaos energy that my life essence is comprised of. To make matters worse, whenever I get a glimpse of my old life, I fall into a destructive madness that makes me impossible to live a normal life. I'm imprisoned down here, just as you are. All my power is for nothing. Nandi wanted to scream, but in presence of Baba Yaga, all he could do was to clench the indestructible armrests of his chair. Chapter 1023 Dangerous Wishes Part 1. Why does Nandi say that we're imprisoned here? Nana, are you going to use us and the children for your experiments? Freya asked while the identity of their host became clearer by the second. Her mind refused to believe that the protagonist of a cautionary fairy tale might be real, but the more she heard, the more legends made sense. Not at all. Nana shook her head. You're free to go whenever you want. I will not move a finger to harm you, but I'm afraid that those waiting for you outside will not be as kind. I'm offering you a choice. Stay here with me and help me with my research. Not only will I save your lives, but I will also give you power beyond your wildest dreams. Or you can leave these caves and die a dog's death at the hands of the very people you considered your allies. Floria took all of her amulets out of her dimensional necklace, discovering that none of them worked. She thought about how the upper floors of the mines were so clean despite Belen's findings, about how well-timed the attack had been, and suddenly everything made sense. Outside the crystal mines, a few minutes after the ghouls' ambush, Captain Cordis of the original expedition, Captain Lotta who led the reinforcements, Tlee, the Royal Prospectors foreman, and Wyra, vice head of the Crystal Shield Guild, were dining together while waiting for the Ernest sisters to return. Each one of them was interested in a different member of the Ernest family. Cordis and Iris were itching for some trouble to arise so that they could prove to be Floria's match, if not even her betters. Tlee kept rehearsing in her mind the speeches she had prepared to convince Quilla to become her apprentice. Between her talent and the political prowess of the Urna's family, Klee was certain that with Quilla by her side, the sky was the limit to how rich her Orman household could become. Only Wyra was worried about their safety and kept looking at her communication amulet in the hope to receive a call. I know that it's dumb worrying for God, but I can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. Wyra Yunja was a young woman in her early 20s, about 1.7 meters, 5 feet 7 inches, tall, with a pixie cut and a round face. She could have been considered cute, if not for her thick muscular build and her square jaw. Coupled with her fierce eyes, her physique gave her a cold demeanor that made Wyra look like a disgruntled drill sergeant always ready to dish out punishment. All the reports she had received from the guild members tasked with keeping the high officials under surveillance had yet to reveal anything suspicious, yet it only made Wyra more anxious. She didn't expect all of them to commit high treason or to indulge in unspeakable vices, but they were too clean for her taste. The background check Archon Urnas had performed on Freya's request had revealed nothing new, and the daily activities of the three mages had stuck to the military code bordering on obsession. It doesn't make sense. I could believe if one high officer was a spotless goody two-shoes, but all of them? An incompetent man like Cordis should take out his anger on the soldiers, while I would expect that a shrewd social climber like Lotta would regularly call her contacts and try to make Captain Urnas look bad. Klee Orman is the only one I managed to predict. She works all day in the caves, and when she gets back to the camp, she barely has the energy left to eat before going to sleep. Yet the only possible reason I can find to explain why the undead didn't detonate the mines is that there is one or more of them among us, waiting for the opportunity to strike. Wyra thought. While she stared at her steak as if it could provide her with an epiphany, a soldier pulled the curtain of the tent to the side, letting a handsome man in. Great Mage Niragor, what a lovely surprise. Captain Lotta stood up and gave him a small bow. To what do we owe the pleasure? Searching for crystal veins is hardly a task worthy of a great mage. Everyone else present felt insulted at those words, especially Klee. Hearing Lotta belittle her job just to suck up to a certified loser like Cowlion made her want to puke. Alas, I bear bad news. Plan A was an utter failure. We lost contact while all members of the special unit tasked with retrieving the package. It's time for Plan B, Captain Lotta. Clefa's Lotta was a woman in her mid-20s, about 1.6 meters, 5 feet 3 inches, tall with wheat blonde hair and hazel eyes, born and raised in the north. She always wore makeup to lighten the pallor of her skin, but hearing those words made her turn so white that everyone thought that she was about to faint. Attention, this is not a drill. She said into her communication amulet the moment she recovered from the shock. Activate lockdown protocol. Password Blue, Dragon, 9-7. What the heck does that mean? Klee stood up while pointing a darkness wand at Iraz's face and her Tier 4 magic holding ring at Callion's heart. Wyra had no idea what was happening, but seeing her communication amulet forcefully turned off was enough to make her weave her best spells while keeping an eye on the newcomer. Prospector Orman is right, Lotta. What reason do you have to enforce the dimensional sealing array and put the guards on alert? What the heck is this beanpole talking about? I never heard about any plan being implemented. Cordis said. Please, let me do the talking, Clephas. Cowlion put his hands in the air in a sign of submission, quickly followed by Lotta. With their hands away from the weapons and their rings pointing at the ceiling, the other three mages felt a bit more in control. I apologize for the sudden intrusion, but Captain Lotta and I are working for the good of the kingdom. The war with the undead courts is killing the best warriors from both sides, and the price to pay for each victory makes them hollow. Cowlion said, I come on behalf of Archmage Dyrus and the undead courts who have resolved for a peaceful solution. The undead courts are willing to settle for 25% of the mind crystals in exchange to waive their rights over the veins, and all Archmage Dyrus asks is the life of the three Ernest sisters. Are you out of your mind? Klee couldn't believe her own ears. Why the heck would we do something like that? I'm glad you asked. First, in case you failed to notice, the army sent an entire battalion to protect the mines, and all of them are either on Dyrus's payroll or thralls. We took our time so that the moment our undead allies stage their attack to seize the mines, all your soldiers who didn't switch sides during the last few days will tragically die during the ensuing battle. Second, If you join us, you'll be acclaimed as heroes. All of you will be promoted and receive enough riches to never have to worry again about your future, whereas if you refuse, you'll just rise the body count. Third, even if somehow you manage to kill both of us and escape, you'll be killed either by Captain Lotta's soldiers or by the undead army that has stepped inside the camp the moment the lockdown started. Chapter 1024 Dangerous Wishes Part 2. Calian looked Cordis in the eyes and said, "Aren't you tired of being stuck as a captain at your age? How do you think Lotta built such a quick and brilliant career? Not by risking her life like a moron, but by choosing her battles wisely and her allies even more wisely. If a paper pusher like Barian managed to become a general, imagine what you could do with both the undead courts and an archmage backing you. The secrets of magic they could share with their precious ally." "Thanks, but no thanks," Cordis replied, making everyone open their eyes wide in surprise. "I'm already at my wits' end as a captain. A higher rank would spell disaster for all the poor soldiers under my command. I might not be great mage material, but I believe in the oath I took to the kingdom years ago. It's better to die like a free man after killing 2 traitors than joining them in disgrace. Talk for yourself." Plea turned her darkness wand against Cordis and shot him at point blank. "I'm too old and rich to die for something as stupid as an ideal. Great Mage Nuragor, count me in." She was now pointing both her wand and ring at Wyra, who had never stopped chanting. "What about you, Wyra?" Calian said. "I read your file. You graduated from a minor academy and are now forced to follow Freya Erna's in exchange for the crumbs of her knowledge. Right now, my soldiers have probably already killed every single member of the Crystal Shield. Your guild is finished and your companions are all dead, but destiny has given you a chance you never had before. Join us and tell everyone how valiantly the Crystal Shield fought along their lord to fight the undead before their untimely death. Once everything is over, you'll be free to choose your own reward. Specializations, a noble title, even eternal life might be yours." Calian's words were filled with poison and yet coated by so much honey that it made them alluring. Wyra Yunja had been born from a humble family that had put all their hopes and dreams in her once her magical talent had bloomed. Yet Wyra had failed to enroll in one of the 6 academies, failed in following the Magic Emperor's footsteps, and even failed to join the Mage Association. Being a mercenary wasn't her dream job, only a last-ditch effort to escape from a mediocre life of servitude at the whims of some noble, to not become a loyal dog fed on money rather than just meat. So far, even that last-ditch effort had proven to be a failure. Wyra had become a vice head only after Freya had kicked out the guild members from the great academies, and even if she was teaching them her specializations, it wasn't enough. Wyra was a slow learner and Freya had to split her time to teach 3 different specializations, whereas Wyra would need individual lessons to make some real progress. "Fine, count me in," she said amid tears. Just speaking those words made her feel dirty inside. "If I refuse, they will just kill me. If I accept, at least I'll have an opportunity to tell the truth to Archon Ernas once we get back to the base," Wyra said, not trusting Calian one bit. "Excellent." Calian gave her a smile that had made many hearts pound in the past. "Words are cheap, so I hope you'll excuse me if I don't trust your word. I'll need a demonstration of your loyalty." At a snap of his fingers, the curtain of the tent opened again, revealing the presence of 3 prisoners bound and gagged right outside the officers' quarters. The prisoners were the seconds in command of those that great mage Nuragor meant to recruit. "Prospector Orman is already our accomplice for killing the poor Cordis, who spared from my test since he is, you know, dead." Calian laughed at his own joke while exposing the neck of Ratha, Wyra's assistant and her best friend. Fear dilated his pupils so much that they almost eclipsed his irises while Ratha looked at Wyra with eyes full of tears. That sight and his whimpering filled her with hope. Despite Calian's claims, now that the soundproof spell of the tent had been opened, Wyra could hear the cries of people fighting. The clash of metal and the sizzling of spells filled the air, revealing that the battle had yet to be lost. "Forgive me, Ratha, but no one ever got rich by being nice," she said while unsheathing her combat knife. "I would do anything to spare you this pain, but I have no choice. For our god." Wyra released all the spells she had at the ready, making the command tent burst into flame, thunder, and rock spikes. She covered Rotha with her body while using her knife to set him free. Hidden among the magical onslaught, there was the flare spell that the crystal shield used as a signal on the battlefield. It was red and violet, meaning both run for your life, and there is still hope. Well, that was impressive. Callion's voice surprised Wyra, but Rotha and her didn't stop running. How can he be still alive after being hit by so many spells at point blank? She thought while looking at the corpses of the soldiers guarding the tent. Even Tlee's royal prospector armor couldn't do much from so close. Her face was badly burned, and she was bleeding from all her orifices. Callion would have been in the same condition if not for his vampire blood core mending his injuries just enough to let light magic do the rest. A thrall had the same powers of their undead sire, but they were limited by the amount of life essence they shared. Care to join me for a hunt? He asked Lotta, who was healing even faster thanks to the ghoul blood coursing through her core. Gods, I should have done this years ago, he said after Lotta nodded and they had started the chase. My strength, my magical powers, even my senses are enhanced to the point that I feel reborn. I wish Verhen was here so that I could kill him like the dog he is. Right after killing his beloved Floria right in front of his eyes. Flying Griffin Resort, a few minutes after Callion had enforced the camp's lockdown. The communication amulet pulling at his consciousness forced Lith to get out of the shower with shampoo still in his hair. During the last few days, he and Camilla had spent every moment before sunset enjoying the beauty Mount Lacra had to offer. The rest of the time they would talk about their dreams for the future, taste delicious food, and spend hours in the bedroom. Camilla liked how invigoration made sleeping optional, allowing her to enjoy all the 24 hours each day had to offer. Damn, let's hope it's not Faluel, he said to Camilla, who was still under the shower. I swear, if my apprenticeship starts now of all moments, with all the money I spent for this goddamn place. Seeing Orion's rune lit made Lith sigh in relief for one entire second before he became grumpy again. What is it now? Do you realize how late it is here? Lith asked. Due to different time zones, it was almost dinner time at Floria's camp, late night for Orion, and way past midnight for Lith. Chapter 1025 Dragonspeed Part 1. Help me, Lith, you're my only hope. Orion had watery eyes and didn't crack a single joke about the soap in Lith's hair or about him answering the amulet while shirtless. I put both a tracker and an alarm spell in my daughter's amulets so that whenever the communication amulets are not stored in a dimensional item, I get notified the moment the signal gets cut off by a dimensional sealing array. A few minutes ago, all of them went suddenly off the grid. Are you sure? Lith tried to say, yet his stomach already churned. Yes. First, I checked with their commanding officer who knew nothing about an attack or lockdown. Then, I tried to call every single member of the expedition whose contact rune I have, and all of them are unavailable as well. Barian tried to reassure me since he received the last report less than an hour ago, and everything was fine. But when he failed to contact anyone even through the camp's secure line, we understood something is going on. Orion managed to keep his words simple and his explanation linear. What can I do? Lith knew Floria's location only by name. Aside from the Keller and the Distar regions, he didn't travel the kingdom ever since he worked for the White Griffin Academy. Even then, Lith had only been to cities with their own warp gates. Your apprenticeship has yet to start, so you might not know it, but just like plants, Emperor beasts have their own network of gates. Orion explained, your master can send you almost anywhere, whereas the closest city gate is hundreds of kilometers from the caves. I'm in the middle of a mission for the Royals, and I'm not even supposed to break the communication silence. Journey is busy as well, but even if we weren't, we'd never get there in time. The Army and the Association will need hours to prepare a strike force big enough to face an enemy so powerful that it isolated the 1,000-men battalion they sent a few days ago as reinforcements. Even once they are ready, they still have to get there. You are the only one who can get there quickly thanks to the Beast's network and pull one of your miracles out of your ass. Please, I don't care about how you do it nor about anyone else in that goddamn camp. All I ask you to do is to get there, find my daughters, and get them to safety. I would do it myself, but the signal disappeared, and so did Orion's hologram. In its place, there was a map of the kingdom with a blinking dot where the camp was located. The moment Lith read the Crystal Mines tag, a shiver ran down his spine. Is everything all right? Camilla approached him while wearing only a fluffy bathrobe. She had never heard either of the Erna's couple lose their cool, and even if the running water had covered most of the conversation, Lith staring at the amulet didn't bode well. No, not in the least. Floria, Freya, and Quilla just went MIA in a goddamn crystal mine. A small burst of water magic dried his hair and removed the soap as the skinwalker armor covered him. I never told Floria about her awakening. Prolonged exposure to such a massive mana geyser could. Camilla placed her forefinger on Litha's lips, cutting him short. You can explain it to me later. Now go. Your friends need you. Camilla looked at him in the eyes, letting Lith know that she had complete trust in him. Thanks, Camille. He kissed her finger before being cut short again. I said go. Kiss any of them, and I'll kill you. She yelled while he disappeared through a warped steps leading to the resort's lobby and its gate. Inca for one now. Lith slammed his ID on the counter to show that he had the privileges to go there. Inca was a military training camp in the Keller region that had only one perk. It was built so close to a mana geyser that Lith needed a single-dimensional door to reach it. Is it something wrong with your accommodation? The Flying Griffin would be glad to. Losing an archmage as a client worried the concierge, but the thick mana filled with killing intent that was strangling him didn't leave space for conversation. I said now. Litha's eyes were bursting with mana while his body emitted sudden gusts of wind and generated enough pressure to make the furniture of the entire lobby rattle as if there was a quake. Have a safe trip, the poor man managed to say with his last breath. Not even fear could put a leash on over 2 decades of impeccable work. Only once Lith disappeared and the concierge had made sure that someone would cover for him did the man allow himself to faint. Solus, pick me up at Inca. Prepare for Floria's Omega protocol. Lith said in his communication amulet the moment the desk sergeant cleared him to leave. Omega. The word made the drowsiness disappear from her voice. Unlike him, Solus liked to sleep at night. To Solus, slumber was a rare commodity that also gave her access to glimpses of her past through dreams. I'll be right there. Lith found the tower waiting for him and used mind fusion to bring Solus up to speed in the blink of an eye. That's extreme and sudden. Are you really sure? There was no time for words. Even thoughts felt slow as she went back to Lucia and opened the steps to Faluel's lair. Damn sure. Lith walked through the dimensional door while the tower shrunk. They had yet to reveal to Faluel Solus's tower form, so by the time Solus slipped back at his finger, Lith was already asking his mentor for help. I have no idea what's going on, but your friend Orion is right. I can send you in the turf of Agitor the Drake, and then he can warp you even closer to your destination. Just give me a second. I can't use a mind link from this distance, so explaining the situation to him might take a while. 3 of Faluel's heads were awake while the remaining 4 were asleep. Hydras were among the few creatures that could rest and reset the effects of invigoration while working non-stop, which in normal circumstances would make Lith green with envy. Luckily, Emperor Beasts didn't mince words nor were big on pleasantries. Agitor, this is an emergency. My disciple needs help. Open a gate, and then send him to the following coordinates as fast as you can, please. That was all the explanation Faluel gave while sharing the mine's location. On it, either Agitor's curiosity was non-existent or the word emergency meant a great deal for Emperor Beasts. The Drake linked the warping array of his lair to Faluel's without asking a single question until he looked his guest in the eyes. Is this a matter of friends, love, or family? The Drake resembled an oversized lizard covered in sapphire blue scales with a huge white horn coming out of his snout. Drakes had the physical prowess of dragons, but lacked both wings and origin flames. They could channel the power of the elements in their breath, giving it special properties that didn't consume their mana. All of the above. Lith had no idea what answer would get the lesser dragon to give his all, so he went all in.